In ages past, alchemists harnessed the raw power of ley lines and magic stones to forge legendary weapons and brew life-saving medicines. Among these practitioners was a dedicated healer, tirelessly adjusting temperatures and extracting medicinal properties to meet the endless demands for her potions. But the strain of her labor eventually became too much. With a sudden, sickening lurch, she collapsed to the floor as her assistants cried out in alarm. In that moment of fading consciousness, memories of another life surfaced. A life of relentless, soul-crushing toil at a Japanese trading company. She realized with bitter irony that even in a world of magic, she had once again driven herself to the point of total exhaustion, repeating the same fatal mistake. A divine presence observed her plight, noting her repetitive fate and offering a final chance to begin anew with a fresh start in this world. Opening her eyes to a new dawn, she was greeted by the warm, tearful smiles of a couple who named her Mary Asfield. As a babe in her mother's arms, she made a silent vow to finally find the peaceful, quiet life that had always eluded her. Years passed, and the young girl, now known as Meru, arrived at the village center to dutifully pay the barley tax. The village chief welcomed her warmly, noting how much she had grown in the 2 years since her parents' passing and commending her for her strength. He had seen her adapt well to the rural life. But Meru herself was lost in thought, contemplating the 12 years she had spent in this, her third incarnation. Unlike her previous lives, she was far from the trappings of nobility or the stress of overwork, living a humble existence in the countryside. As she makes her way through the village, she is greeted by the familiar, friendly faces of her neighbors. Kate approaches with a basket overflowing with wild vegetables, having anticipated her return and insisting she takes them home. She thanks her elder neighbor profusely, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the constant generosity. Kate simply smiles, telling her not to worry and that she views her as a younger sister, emphasizing that they are all part of the same community. The light-hearted atmosphere continues as another villager joins the conversation, boasting about the quality of their harvest. They laugh together about the simple joys of rural life, with the man promising to bring over some of his own cooking later that evening. Returning to the quiet of her own home, she feels a deep sense of peace. The genuine warmth of the people around her reinforces her belief that this simple, unburdened life is exactly what she has been searching for. Her daily routine is a series of physical tasks, from tilling the earth to tending to her livestock. She works with a steady rhythm, even as her cow playfully interrupts her chores with an affectionate lick. While laboring in the tall grass, she reflects on the reality of her situation, acknowledging that managing a farm entirely on her own is a daunting task. A wave of fatigue washes over her, and she finds herself wishing for a moment of true respite. That wish is interrupted by a sudden, jarring crack as her tool strikes a hidden stone. She looks down in dismay at her broken sickle, a supposed family treasure she called the Kusanagi sickle, now rendered useless by a single unlucky blow. As the sun begins to set, she finds her bovine companion already drifting off into a deep slumber. She can't help but feel a twinge of envy at the animal's ability to sleep so soundly, completely unbothered by the day's mishaps. She gazes at the sleeping creature with a tender smile, her resolve hardening. Despite the broken tools and the exhaustion, she knows she must keep working to ensure her only remaining family is well fed and cared for. She stood before a wooden cabinet, her mind drifting to the life she had left behind. To avoid the mistakes of her past, she had been intentionally limiting her own potential, but the need for a new tool finally forced her hand. With a determined breath, she began the delicate process of alchemy. Light erupted from her hands as she channeled her energy, the air shimmering with magical residue as she carefully combined the ingredients. The process was a resounding success, yielding several vials of potent liquid. She noted with a mix of pride and caution that she had produced an intermediate-grade potion of exceptional quality, far exceeding what was common. Realizing the potential trouble such a high-tier item could bring, she decided it would be best to dilute the mixture to a more standard level before attempting to sell it. Gazing at the shimmering pink liquid in a small glass bottle, she pondered its worth. In a remote frontier area like this, such a high-quality concoction was likely unheard of, and she wondered if the local market could even handle its true value. After bidding her cow, Miko, to stay put and be a good girl, she set off for the frontier town of Corite. As she walked through the bustling streets, she weighed her options, ultimately deciding that the Merchant Guild offered a safer, more professional environment for her business than the Rowdy Adventurers Guild. Inside the guild, she was greeted by Carla, the professional receptionist, who inquired if this was her first visit. Carla explained that while there was a membership fee, it was currently half price for newcomers, and she confirmed that the young girl was indeed there to sell her handcrafted potions. The transaction proved to be quite lucrative, leaving her with a small fortune of 4 gold and 8 silver coins clinking in her palm. She felt a wave of relief, hoping that this would be more than enough to cover the cost of a high-quality replacement sickle. Her search led her to the forge of a broad-shouldered blacksmith named Gand, who was immediately impressed by her discerning eye. He presented a finely crafted blade, noting that while it was expensive at 1 gold coin, its quality was undeniable. She was pleasantly surprised by the price, finding it much more affordable than she had anticipated given the craftsmanship. With her primary goal accomplished and plenty of coin to spare, she decided to indulge in a bit more shopping before heading home. Inspecting her new tool, she noticed the faint glow of a slashing enhancement woven into the metal. Satisfied with her purchase, she began the trek back to her village as the sun began its descent. She shows off a magic stone she bought with her remaining money, explaining how she's enhanced it slightly with alchemy to improve its utility. With a confident grin, she presents her Kusanagi sickle number 2, ready to demonstrate the power of the newly infused stone. She swings the tool with a powerful stroke, effortlessly clearing a large patch of grass as the magic-infused stone glows with energy. As she works, she muses on how magic-powered tools will save her from the back-breaking labor of farm work, allowing her to focus on potions and improving her life without drawing too much attention. Suddenly, a sickening crunch echoes as the sickle's handle snaps under the strain, leaving her staring in disbelief at the broken tool. She realizes that standard, store-bought tools simply aren't durable enough to withstand the raw power of the magic stone she's using, forcing her to reconsider her efficiency plan. Looking into her nearly empty coin pouch, she laments her impulsive spending on magic stones and food, realizing she's reached a point where she must take a risk and sell more goods. Returning to the Merchant Guild, she receives her official membership card from Carla, who explains that it can be used for payments and checking her balance. Her eyes nearly pop out of her head when she sees the balance. The magic stone she sold fetched a staggering 30 gold coins due to the exceptional quality of its slashing enhancement. She thanks Carla and makes a quick exit, planning to buy more stones, while the receptionist watches her go with a growing sense of suspicion. She stood alone, her mind racing with questions about the young girl who had just left. The sheer power of the magic stones Meru provided was unsettling, far beyond what a child should possess. Even more baffling was the girl's literacy and her grasp of complex contracts, traits rarely seen in one so young. Despite her lingering doubts, the receptionist ultimately decided that the source of the goods mattered less than the profit they brought to the guild. She turned away, dismissing the urge to investigate further, though she couldn't help but wonder if the stones were actually diluted mid-grade gems being sold at a premium. Meanwhile, back in the quiet of her own room, Meru collapsed onto her bed with a heavy sigh of exhaustion. The day's events and a long journey back from the city had drained her energy completely. She lay there, reflecting on the physical toll of carrying so many magic stones over such a distance. While she was glad to have the materials, the fear of developing unsightly muscles from the heavy labor crossed her mind, prompting a small, worried frown. Determined to make her life easier, the young alchemist sat up and gathered her new supplies, deciding that more enhancements were the solution. She focused her intent on a small pouch, preparing to apply a spatial expansion enchantment to increase its capacity. With careful precision, she began attaching the glowing magic stones to the fabric of the pouch. Each stone was placed with intent, weaving the magical threads into the very fibers of the material. Once the process was complete, she held up the newly created magic bag, marveling at its increased storage capacity. Though it looked no different on the outside, the enchantment allowed it to hold far more than its size suggested, a perfect tool for her future errands. After securing the bag to her waist, she checked her reflection in the mirror, satisfied with the practical yet stylish addition to her outfit. With several magic stones still remaining, her mind began to wander toward other household improvements she could make. She considered the daily drudgery of fetching water and chopping firewood, realizing that her alchemy could simplify even the most mundane tasks. The idea of a stove with adjustable heat for perfect cooking particularly appealed to her, promising a much easier life in the kitchen. This led her back to the local forge, where the massive blacksmith proudly unveiled the custom order she had placed. The heavy, metallic stove stood ready, a testament to her growing influence and her desire to blend magical convenience with everyday living. He gestures toward the heavy iron appliance, explaining that it functions as both an oven and a stove. He points out the specific slots where fire and ice magic stones should be inserted to power the device. Meru looks at the large contraption with a mix of awe and concern, wondering how she will manage such a substantial piece of equipment. Continuing his explanation, he demonstrates how the temperature can be precisely controlled. By sliding the magic stones closer to or further from the cooking surface, the intensity of the heat or cold can be adjusted. Meru is amazed by the ingenuity of the tool, realizing that with such control, she will never have to worry about accidentally burning her meals again. Seeing the size of the stove, he kindly offers to help her transport it back to her home. However, she politely declines, assuring him that she can handle it herself. With a swift motion, she holds open her small pouch, and the massive stove is pulled inside, disappearing into the magically expanded space. The sight leaves him completely stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief. He stares at the young girl, his mind racing as he realizes that she possesses a high-level magic bag, a luxury item far beyond the means of a typical villager. He begins to speculate that she might be from a noble family that has fallen on hard times. Concerned for her well-being, he tells her to reach out to him if she ever finds herself in difficult circumstances. He remains convinced that her possession of such rare items indicates a tragic past. She simply nods in agreement, accepting his offer of support before heading home. Once back in the safety of her own kitchen, she wastes no time putting her new acquisition to use. She carefully prepares a batch of dough, her hands moving with practiced ease as she kneads and shapes the mixture on her wooden counter, eager to test the capabilities of the magic oven. After some time, she pulls a tray of freshly baked cookies from the heat, admiring their perfect golden brown hue. The aroma fills the room, and she takes a satisfied bite, noting that the color and texture are exactly what she had hoped for. The flavor is an immediate revelation, causing her to beam with pure delight. She exclaims how delicious they are, her face lighting up with a joy she hasn't felt in a long time. The quality of the bake provided by the magic stove is far superior to anything she could have achieved before. She finds herself unable to stop eating, quickly devouring the entire batch. Looking at the empty plate, she realizes that her standard diet of simple steamed sweet potatoes will no longer suffice now that she has experienced such culinary luxury. She lets out a satisfied sigh, feeling full and content. As she cleans up, she thinks of her late parents, wishing they could have tasted the treats she made with the wheat they worked so hard to grow. She feels a deep sense of gratitude and looks forward to a fulfilling, quiet life. Suddenly, a firm knocking at her door interrupts her peaceful reflection. She paused, a half-eaten cookie still in her hand, as the unexpected sound of knocking echoed through the small room. A wave of panic washed over her. She wondered if the sweet aroma had drawn someone to her door. Her mind raced with the terrifying possibility that if the villagers discovered her magic tools, her dreams of a quiet, slow life would vanish, replaced by the grueling labor of a village baker. Fearing the worst, she cautiously cracked the door open just enough to peek through, her face flushed with guilt. Before even seeing who was there, she stammered out a hasty denial, insisting that she wasn't eating anything at all. However, her attempt at a cover-up was cut short as she pulled the door wide, only to find a group of stern-faced men waiting for her. At the front stood a formidable officer, who brandished an official document and declared with cold authority that Mary Asfield Fourleaf was under arrest. Meru is suddenly confronted by a stern guard who accuses her of tax evasion, demanding she save her excuses for later. She shivers in fear, stammering in confusion as she is dragged off, unable to comprehend why she is being treated like a criminal and taken from her home. As she is transported in a rattling carriage, she tries to explain her activities to the village chief, mentioning the sweets and medicine she produced. The chief can only watch in bewilderment as the situation escalates beyond his control. Upon arriving at the Lord's Manor, she faces Baron Brown of Corite, who presents her with documents detailing her suspiciously high earnings. He scrutinizes her, questioning how a simple girl could earn such a significant income, far exceeding what her supposed occupation as a potion maker should allow. The Baron slams his hand on the desk, refusing to believe her claim that she made the potions herself. In response, she confidently offers to demonstrate her skills on the spot to clear her name and prove her innocence. She begins the delicate process of alchemy, meticulously adjusting the water temperature and extracting medicinal properties while stabilizing the magical effects with practiced ease. The result is a high-quality intermediate potion, ++, leaving the witnesses in a state of utter disbelief at the potency of her creation. This revelation causes immediate confusion, as the guard notes that official records only show her supplying low-grade potions. The room fills with whispers about the impossible quality of her work and where she could have learned such techniques. She then reveals her secret, explaining that she had been diluting her potent mixtures with mana-infused water to lower their grade for general sale, as the high-quality versions were too valuable. Presenting the diluted samples, she describes them as mere casual handiwork for her village, leaving the Baron and his men speechless at her casual display of immense talent. She had left the Baron in a state of absolute shock, his voice booming with disbelief that anyone could refer to such high-level alchemy as mere casual handiwork. The village chief listened intently as she recounted the day's events, admitting he never truly imagined her skills were so advanced that she could produce genuine, high-grade potions. He confirmed the terms of the Baron's decree, explaining that the threat of punishment for her alleged tax evasion would be dropped entirely, provided she agreed to relocate and open an apothecary in the town. She confessed that while the thought of leaving her farm behind brought a pang of sadness, the offer of a pre-established shop was a generous opportunity she felt compelled to accept, though the chief remained visibly worried about her future. She struggled to lead her stubborn cow toward the village exit, ignoring the chief's stern, parting warning that any further misbehavior would result in the animal being sent to the butcher. He offered a final reassurance, promising to personally oversee her fields and look after Miko the cow's well-being while she established her new life in the city. She paused for a quiet moment of reflection, the reality of leaving her childhood home finally beginning to sink in. She knelt before the weathered grave markers of her family to pay her final respects, just as the voices of the villagers began to call out her name from the path ahead. They gathered around her with warm smiles and heavy baskets, including the blacksmith Gand and the maternal Kate, who insisted she take their gifts of food and supplies to ensure she wouldn't go hungry in the town. She turned to Kate with tears in her eyes, expressing her profound gratitude for the woman who had looked after her since she was left alone, only to be told that the kindness had always been mutual. She listens as the older woman shares a tender moment, admitting that the young girl's presence was a great comfort after the loss of her husband. The warmth of the kitchen and the sincerity in the woman's voice make the impending departure feel all the more poignant. The woman urges her to be mindful of her aunt's advice, but the girl's emotional reaction prompts a playful, if blunt, dismissal. With a flushed face and tears pricking her eyes, the girl is told she's an idiot and shouldn't even bother returning, a harsh mask for the woman's own sadness. Despite the harsh words, she offers a sincere thank you, promising to return for visits whenever the opportunity arises. The elder woman simply smiles, labeling her a stubborn but endearing child as they share one last quiet moment together. With a final wave and a heart full of mixed emotions, she bids farewell to the warmth and simplicity of her hometown, ready to embrace the unknown. As she walks the lonely path toward the city, she reflects on how quickly her life has changed. Though the transition was sudden, the prospect of running a small apothecary without the burden of overwork fills her with a surprising sense of optimism. Upon reaching the city, she finds herself standing before a grand, multi-story building that is to be her new place of business. She hesitates for a moment, double-checking that this impressive structure is indeed the shop she was promised. Inside, she begins to worry about the logistics of her new life, realizing that managing a storefront alone might lead back to the very exhaustion she hoped to escape. She needs a plan to keep things manageable and avoid the trap of overworking herself again. Seeking a solution, she approaches a local merchant to discuss a consignment arrangement. The woman listens intently to the proposal for commission-based payments and readily agrees, seeing no issue with the terms and welcoming the new business partnership. Relieved by how easily the deal was struck, she expresses her gratitude and promises to bring the stock she has already prepared. Meanwhile, the merchant begins efficiently clearing space, tossing items aside to make room for the new inventory. Her eyes widen as she watches the woman effortlessly stow items into a magic bag. She can't help but feel a twinge of envy, thinking that if only she had a higher quality magic stone, she could craft a vessel with such incredible capacity herself. She's caught off guard when Carla leans in, eyes gleaming with a professional hunger, and asks if she would be interested in selling magic bags. The suggestion hangs in the air, leaving the young alchemist momentarily speechless as she processes the magnitude of the request. Hesitating, she explains the complexities of such a task, noting her lack of materials and the fact that she is primarily an apothecary. She points out that a bag's capacity is tied to the quality of the magic stone used, making pricing a delicate matter. Carla, undeterred by these technical hurdles, proposes a deal. If she can produce just one prototype, the guild will handle all material procurement and sales logistics on her behalf. Grateful for the support, she accepts the offer, her face lighting up with a smile as they finalize the arrangement. Before she departs, she also requests a fresh supply of medicinal herbs, which Carla provides alongside a promise to prepare more potion bottles for their next meeting. As she departs, Carla erupts in a fit of ecstatic joy, squealing at the prospect of exclusive potion sales and the prestige of offering magic bags. Her celebration is abruptly interrupted by the arrival of Grog, the stern-faced head of the Commerce Guild, who demands to know the cause of the commotion. Shortly thereafter, in a more private setting, Grog and Carla report to Baron Brown. The Baron listens intently as they discuss the promising young apothecary, his interest piqued by the mention of her unique ability to craft magic bags. He strokes his chin thoughtfully, acknowledging that while magic bags are rare, the girl's insight is truly impressive. They speculate that while her current creations are decent, providing her with superior magic stones could result in top-tier artifacts of immense value. With a decisive nod, the Baron commands Carla to gather the finest materials immediately. She acknowledges the order with a crisp bow and hurries out of the room, her excitement still palpable even in her professional retreat. Left alone with him, Grog expresses his lingering disbelief, questioning how a simple apothecary could possess the secrets to creating magic tools. The Baron remains silent, his gaze fixed on the documents before him as he ponders the girl's mysterious potential. He leans back, a small smile playing on his lips as he considers the possibility that this girl might be more than even he can handle. He quietly hopes she will continue her lineage in the city, recognizing the rare talent she brings to his domain. Meanwhile, far from the manor, the young alchemist stares in frustration at a handful of wilted, subpar herbs. The gap between her ambitious goals and the reality of her current resources draws a sharp, annoyed groan from her lips. She sat at the table with Kate, examining the herbs provided by the guild with a look of disappointment. The quality was abysmal, far below what she needed for her work, leading her to realize that if she wanted proper materials, she would have to venture out and gather them herself. The journey proved more taxing than anticipated, as she struggled up the steep mountain paths, her breath coming in heavy gasps. Despite the physical strain, her determination remained unshaken as she pushed forward through the dense undergrowth. Pausing to catch her breath, she looked around the rugged terrain, questioning why the most potent herbs always seemed to grow in the most inhospitable environments. She made a mental note to find a more accessible location for her future foraging trips. Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a thunderous roar as a massive forest mud bear emerged from the trees. The beast was a formidable sight, but she stood her ground, having anticipated such an encounter in these wilds. Instead of fleeing, she reached for the long weapon strapped to her back, a spark of excitement in her eyes. This was the perfect opportunity to test the capabilities of her newly crafted gear in a real combat situation. The bear lunged with a powerful swipe of its claws, but she moved with surprising agility, ducking low as the massive limb whistled harmlessly through the air above her. Seizing the opening, she delivered a swift, fluid strike that bit deep into the creature's thick hide. She was impressed by the weapon's balance and the effortless way it sliced through the beast's defenses. As she fought, she recalled the conversation with the blacksmith who had forged the polearm to her specifications. It was a sophisticated tool, embedded with two distinct magic stones, one to enhance its cutting power and another to channel electrical energy. With a focused breath, she activated the weapon's latent enchantments, causing bright arcs of lightning to dance along the blade. The air crackled with power as she prepared to deliver a finishing blow. A massive explosion of energy erupted from the polearm, engulfing the bear in a blinding flash of light and force. The sheer magnitude of the attack left no doubt about the devastating potential of her new creation. She stood over the massive, fallen beast, her mind already turning to the practicalities of her victory. While the magic stone within was a tempting prize, she knew that a creature of this size required professional dismantling, a task far beyond her current means in the field. Recalling the rigorous lessons of her past life, she reminded herself that gathering rare materials in treacherous terrain was a fundamental skill for any alchemist, one that her master had drilled into her soul. With a thoughtful hum, she considered whether the local adventurers' guild might be equipped to process such a formidable specimen. Moments later, her search yielded its first reward as she spotted a vibrant healing herb nestled among the mountain flora. A bright smile lit up her face, her youthful features glowing with satisfaction as she carefully plucked the specimen, the gentle mountain breeze scattering petals around her like a celebratory flurry. Continuing her journey, she trekked deeper into the breathtaking mountain pass, her small figure dwarfed by the towering peaks and lush greenery that surrounded her. The untouched wilderness stretched out in every direction, promising even greater treasures for those brave enough to seek them. As she worked, she began the delicate process of drying her finds, confident that this haul would sustain her production of mid-level potions for quite some time. However, her focus was suddenly broken by a peculiar sight nearby, causing her to pause and lean in for a closer look at a flower that seemed different from the rest. To her astonishment, she discovered a cluster of moonlight herbs, a rarity she hadn't encountered even in her previous life. The discovery of such high-grade materials in this untouched area left her questioning the competence of other local apothecaries, as she marveled at the sheer abundance of the mountain's hidden bounty. When night began to fall, she set up a modest camp, utilizing her enchanted magic stove to prepare a warm meal. She marveled at the convenience of her magic bag, which made solo excursions into the wild remarkably manageable, though she couldn't help but daydream about a bag large enough to house an entire portable cottage. The simple joy of a hot meal in the crisp mountain air brought a flush of contentment to her cheeks. She ate heartily, the rich, savory broth providing the perfect restoration after a long day of harvesting and combat. While she enjoyed the meal, her mind remained active, contemplating the need for new magical tools to improve food preservation during her travels. As she dipped a piece of crusty bread into her stew, she found herself craving the variety of soft, leavened breads from her past, realizing that her next project might involve the search for yeast and better culinary equipment. As the first light of dawn crested over the distant peaks, she stood at the edge of the valley, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. With the powerful magic stone from the defeated bear now in her possession, she felt confident in her ability to craft something truly exceptional, bringing her one step closer to the comfortable, civilized life she envisioned. Returning to the bustling hub of the city, she made her way directly to the Adventurers Guild, where she presented her prize with a resounding thud. The massive carcass of the forest mud bear drew gasps from the onlookers as she calmly requested that the guild's experts begin the dismantling process, her demeanor that of a seasoned professional rather than a young girl. She stands modestly as the guild's dismantler stares in disbelief at the massive beast she delivered. He points out the gaping hole blasted through the creature, unable to fathom how a young girl could have brought down such a formidable predator. Her presence causes the man to erupt into boisterous laughter, finding her feat both incredible and absurd. He offers to buy her a drink in celebration, but she politely declines, her focus remaining on business. When she asks to settle the dismantling fee using her Commerce Guild card, his jaw drops once more, stunned that a child of her age is already a registered member of such a prestigious organization. After the commotion, she finds a quiet corner to rest, her small frame slumped over a table as she fills out the necessary paperwork. The day's exertions have finally caught up with her, and her thoughts drift toward the simple luxury of a hot bath and a visit to the blacksmith. A guild attendant approaches, suggesting that she use the waiting time to officially apply for an adventurer's membership. Leaving the guild behind, she walks through the city streets, but a sudden prickle of unease makes her pause. She glances toward a nearby fence, wondering if her imagination is playing tricks on her or if someone is truly watching from the shadows. Meanwhile, at the grand estate of the local lord, a messenger arrives with urgent news. He announces that a formal missive has arrived from a marquis, addressed directly to the master of the house. The nobleman receives the document with a look of mild surprise, noting the unexpected speed of the report regarding the young apothecary. His aide watches closely as the baron prepares to read the contents aloud, sensing the weight of the information contained within. His expression turns grave as he reads the marquis's decree, which identifies the girl as a rare and vital asset to the entire nation. The orders are clear. She is to be provided with covert protection and constant monitoring. Realizing the immense responsibility placed upon his shoulders, the baron begins to contemplate which of his subordinates is capable of shadowing such a unique individual without being detected. In the bustling heart of the city, a mysterious figure draws the attention of the passing crowds. Whispers follow the man as he moves with a quiet, disciplined grace, his presence so commanding that onlookers wonder if the legendary sword saint has finally arrived in their midst. She begins her day by visiting a local vendor, securing a simple meal as she prepares for the tasks ahead. Despite the recent troubles, her slow life seems to be starting in earnest. Clutching the fresh loaf, she walks through the stone-paved streets, though a lingering thought gives her pause. She decides to check her status with the merchant guild, marveling at how convenient it is to track her earnings and make payments directly through her card. As the numbers come into focus, her eyes widen in disbelief at the staggering sum displayed on the card. She understands the importance of using these funds responsibly to maintain her workshop's economy, wondering if the large sum came from the bulk sale of her recent potions. From the shadows of a nearby building, a disciplined warrior observes her, questioning how a child of her appearance could truly be capable of practicing alchemy. Unaware of the watchful gaze, she arrives at the blacksmith's forge to commission new equipment, presenting her detailed sketches for a sealed refrigerator and a proper bathtub. The blacksmith examines the complex designs, his brow furrowing as he considers the labor involved and the difficulty of constructing a functional bathtub. He explains that using iron would lead to rapid rusting, suggesting that a skilled woodworker would be far better suited for constructing the tub. She realizes with a start that water-resistant metals are not readily available here, while the blacksmith offers a sympathetic shrug for the lack of options. She proposed a solution to the material problem, asking the blacksmith if he could handle the rest if she provided rust-resistant iron. Gand was taken aback by the suggestion, wondering if she truly intended to create such a rare metal herself. She then requested to borrow some of the ores lying around the workshop. Though he didn't quite understand her plan, the blacksmith agreed, sensing that he was about to witness something extraordinary once again. Moments later, the process began with the precise extraction of iron and chromium from the raw materials. Nearby, the mysterious warrior watched in silence, his confusion growing as he tried to make sense of her unconventional methods. With a sudden surge of power, she initiated a metal synthesis, causing the liquefied components to swirl and meld in midair. The warrior was stunned, questioning if what he was seeing was truly alchemy or something far more advanced. The result of her work was a gleaming slab of stainless steel, an alloy unknown to the local craftsman. Gand stared at the metal in disbelief, admitting that he wouldn't even know how to begin reporting such a feat to his superiors. As she explained that extracting and synthesizing components were merely basic applications of her skills, the blacksmith remained fixated on the impossible. He was far more shocked by how she had turned the iron soft and malleable without the use of a forge's heat. Satisfied with the material, she handed it over for the final detailing, acknowledging that such fine work was best left to a professional. Gand accepted the task, noting that the labor cost would be significant, though he urged her to be patient while he worked. As she walked away from the forge, the warrior's gaze followed her, his respect for her deepening. He realized that she was far more than a simple apothecary. She possessed the rare talents of a master magic tool maker as well. Suddenly, she remembered another pressing task, the creation of a magic bag. The thought of the looming workload made her laugh nervously, joking that she might actually die from overwork if she didn't pace herself. Upon arriving at the guild, she was greeted by Carla, who had prepared the necessary materials and empty bottles. After inspecting the high-quality magic stone and wyvern leather, she requested the use of a desk to begin her next project immediately. She presents the finished product, explaining that the spatial expansion enchantment allows for a staggering capacity of 300 cubic meters, the equivalent of 10 full wagons. The receptionist, Carla, can hardly believe the ease with which such a feat was accomplished. Before the shock can even settle, the young alchemist recalls her recent herb-gathering trip, where she secured rare moonlight and healing herbs. She begins to prepare for her next task, her mind already several steps ahead. With focused precision, she initiates a complex alchemical process, balancing water temperature and performing a quadruple refinement. The air shimmers with the intensity of the synthesis sublimation as she works. The result of her labor is a pair of advanced potions, glowing with a brilliant blue hue. These are elixirs of the highest efficacy, capable of mending even the most severe injuries with a single dose. She casually places the bottles on the counter, offering them as extras to the stunned receptionist. Carla stares at the multiplying treasures, her professional composure finally beginning to crack under the weight of such impossible quality. Realizing the magnitude of what has just been handed to her, she slams her hands onto the desk and shouts for the guildmaster. This is no longer a simple transaction. It is a matter of national significance. Moments later, she presents the items to Grog, the head of the guild, who peers skeptically at the vibrant blue liquid. He initially warns her not to shout while handling merchandise, unaware of the treasure before him. His skepticism vanishes instantly upon hearing the appraisal. A bag with the capacity of 10 wagons and potions of unparalleled quality, all crafted on the spot. He gasps in disbelief, his eyes wide as he processes the sheer value of Meru's work. The official appraisal confirms the items are genuine, leading him to conclude that they are far too valuable for a local market and must be auctioned in the royal capital. Meru, meanwhile, can only think of the gold such a sale might bring. Outside the guild, the mysterious warrior watches the exchange through the window, his expression grim. He realizes that if items of this caliber reach the public market, powerful eyes will inevitably turn toward the young girl, confirming his suspicion that she is a master alchemist. He expresses grave concern, noting that while local nobles are one thing, the risk of abduction by foreign powers is a far more serious threat that requires immediate judgment from the Marquis. Meanwhile, the atmosphere is electric within the Grand Royal Capital Auction Hall, where a sea of wealthy patrons has gathered for a highly anticipated event. Taking the stage, the auctioneer unveils the first of the final 2 items, a set of highest quality advanced potions, legendary elixirs said to heal any injury, with a staggering starting price of 10,000 gold coins. The crowd erupts in a frenzy of bidding, the numbers climbing rapidly from 20,000 to 40,000 as even the most seasoned collectors struggle to believe the validity of the appraisal certificates. Suddenly, a single hand rises from the audience, silencing the room with a monumental bid of 150,000 gold coins. Whispers ripple through the hall as onlookers recognize the bidder as the butler of the esteemed Duke Ford family, accompanied by a young man who appears physically exhausted and frail. Following the successful bid, the 2 men retreat to a private room where the butler presents the elixir, expressing his hope that this will finally grant their long-held desire. With trembling hands, the young master uncorks the vial and pours the shimmering liquid directly over his damaged fingers, desperate to test the rumors of its miraculous properties. As the potion touches his skin, a brilliant light erupts, and he watches in disbelief as his injuries vanish instantly, leaving his hand completely restored. While the auctioneer prepares to present the final item of the day, the young noble remains frozen in shock, unable to comprehend the impossible power of the medicine he just used. He could only watch in stunned silence as the auctioneer unveiled the final lot, a magic bag with a staggering capacity of 10 wagons. The crowd erupted, with many whispering that such an artifact was nothing short of a national treasure. Because of its immense strategic value for logistics and trade, the bidding quickly spiraled out of control. Offers of 100,000 and then 200,000 gold coins were shouted across the hall as merchants realized they could transport entire caravans of goods in a single handheld pouch. While the wealthy fought over the price, the leaders of the Commerce Guild exchanged grave looks. They understood that the sudden appearance of such an unprecedented item on the open market signaled a massive shift in the world's power balance. They realized that a master craftsman, someone with the skill to create such wonders, had finally emerged from the shadows. The silhouette of this unknown individual loomed large in their minds, representing both a great opportunity and a potential threat. In response to this realization, the guild officials reached a swift consensus. They knew they had to launch an investigation immediately to uncover the identity of the person behind these miraculous creations. Meanwhile, the young alchemist at the center of the storm was miles away, sinking into a steaming bath with a long, revitalizing sigh. The warm water seemed to wash away the day's fatigue, leaving her in a state of pure relaxation. She had used a flame magic stone to heat the metal tub, finding it a simple and effective way to prepare her soak. Though she noted the stone might wear out quickly and the setup felt more like a giant cauldron than a proper bath, she couldn't deny that it was the best feeling in the world. As she began to dry herself, she considered the need for proper soap and shampoo. She knew she could craft them herself, but her previous attempts had left her hair feeling brittle and shrunken, leading her to think that perhaps a touch of scented oil would suffice for now. With the soak finished and her spirits high, she looked forward to the final part of her evening ritual. The anticipation of a simple pleasure brought a bright, cheerful expression to her face. She poured a cup of ice-cold liquid and took a long, satisfying gulp, letting out a cry of delight at the refreshing chill. It was the perfect end to her day, completely unaware of the search that had been triggered by her work. She sprawls out on her bed, reveling in the comforts of a civilized life. Her latest creation, a magical refrigerator, stands nearby, ensuring her milk stays perfectly chilled, a luxury she finds well worth the effort of crafting. Reflecting on her journey, she realizes how much her life has changed since she began living on her own. The constant, exhausting work of the past has been replaced by a peaceful, leisurely routine that she deeply cherishes. Her quiet contemplation is suddenly interrupted by a sharp rapping at the door. Startled, she wonders who could be visiting at such an hour, her mind racing through possibilities as she reluctantly prepares to answer. Upon opening the door, she is confronted by a tall, stern-faced man in formal attire. Without preamble, he declares that by order of the Marquis, she is to accompany him immediately, leaving her stunned and confused. Panic flares within her as she frantically wonders if she has inadvertently committed some crime like tax evasion. However, as she looks closer at the man's face, a flicker of recognition crosses her mind, though she can't quite place him. She quickly regains her composure and accuses him of being the suspicious individual she had noticed loitering around her home recently. The man is visibly taken aback, impressed that a child could have detected his presence when he had hidden his intent so carefully. He bristles at her accusation, firmly asserting his status as a legitimate knight and warning her not to point anything dangerous at him. She remains skeptical, questioning how someone could throw around a title like Marquis so casually. To prove his identity, he produces an ornate, glowing medal, identifying himself as Blaise Galfield, a knight of the Marquisite's domain. Seeing the authentic insignia, she realizes that in the world of nobility, there is rarely a choice when one is summoned. Shortly thereafter, a horse-drawn carriage rattles down the road, carrying her away from the quiet life she had just begun to enjoy. The suddenness of the departure leaves her with a sense of unease about what lies ahead. Inside the carriage, the knight observes her apprehensive expression and remarks that she seems to be under a significant misunderstanding. She can only offer a weary sigh, bracing herself for whatever encounter the Marquis has planned. She sat across from the knight in the moving carriage, listening as he assured her that no harm would come to her. He explained that from this moment forward, she was officially under the protection of the Marquis, a status meant to ensure her safety and well-being. She couldn't help but feel bewildered, questioning why someone of such high standing would bother offering her protection. Sensing her confusion, he leaned in slightly, preparing to divulge the reasons behind the Marquis's intense interest in her and her unique abilities. He pointed out her extraordinary talent for crafting advanced potions and enchanted bags, skills that the world deemed to be of the highest caliber. The mention of being highest ranking caught her off guard, as she had never considered her work to be anything beyond ordinary or functional. He dropped a bombshell, revealing that the items she had casually sold fetched a staggering 650,000 gold coins at the capital's auction. The sheer magnitude of the sum left her wide-eyed and breathless, struggling to process the astronomical value placed on her creations. She immediately began to protest, her hands waving frantically as she questioned the very logic of such a price. To her, the idea that she had produced anything so valuable was preposterous, and she insisted there must be some fundamental misunderstanding in their assessment of her work. She continued to downplay her abilities, arguing that her potions weren't even of the supreme grade and her bags lacked the massive capacity of true legendary artifacts. She was convinced that there must be plenty of other people in the world capable of producing similar, if not better, items. He met her frantic denials with a heavy, meaningful silence that made her pause mid-sentence. Feeling the weight of his serious gaze, she tentatively asked what he had just said, sensing that a fundamental and perhaps frightening truth was about to be revealed. He delivered the final, crushing blow to her modesty by stating flatly that there simply aren't any others who can do what she does. The realization that she is a unique existence in this world left her completely stunned, her entire worldview shattered in a single, shocking instant. As they travel, the knight explains that the alchemy she practices, capable of producing advanced potions and high-capacity magical bags, is considered a lost art in this era. She is visibly taken aback, questioning what he means by lost. He recounts a grim history from long ago, when the demand for potions became so overwhelming that every alchemist was mobilized by the state. Eventually, they all collapsed from the sheer exhaustion of overwork, leaving no one alive to pass on their secrets. She listens in shock, her mind racing. Having believed her reincarnation occurred shortly after her previous life ended, she urgently asked for the specific time frame of these events. The warrior reveals that more than 1,000 years have passed since that era. The revelation leaves her stunned. She finally understands that if the entire lineage of alchemists was wiped out, the archives and the knowledge passed to apprentices would have vanished, explaining why modern potions are so prohibitively expensive. He continues his explanation, noting that current researchers are only just beginning to stabilize intermediate quality potions. Those few individuals who show any potential for alchemy are strictly protected by the royal palace or powerful high-ranking nobles. He emphasizes that this matter is of the utmost importance for the entire nation, warning her not to take it lightly. She can only offer a nervous, strained laugh, realizing the absurdity of a 12-year-old girl possessing master-level skills without any formal training or mentor. She jokingly suggests she wouldn't mind taking on a few apprentices herself, provided she's guaranteed 3 meals and a nap every day. As the carriage pulls into the grand capital, she looks out the window with a sigh, realizing her dream of a quiet, slow life is rapidly slipping away. They are soon ushered into a magnificent manor, where a dignified man awaits them behind a massive desk. He introduces himself as Gerhard von Fahrenheit, the lord of the Marquisate domain, acknowledging how far they have traveled. The young alchemist offers a respectful bow in return, formally introducing herself as Mary Asfiel Fourleaf. She performs a graceful, traditional alchemical salute, a gesture that immediately catches the Count's attention. He recognizes the ancient etiquette, noting the rarity of such a display in the modern era. Seeing her display, the knight steps forward, offering to demonstrate her prowess by preparing an advanced potion for the lord. However, the Count dismisses the need for immediate proof, his decision already seemingly made. The Count, however, addresses the young girl directly, commanding her to apply herself to her work with sincerity. In exchange for her dedication, he pledges his personal protection, ensuring her safety within his domain. She bows low, expressing her profound gratitude and honor at being taken under such prestigious patronage. As they depart the audience chamber, the knight's composure breaks slightly, and he questions the sudden disappearance of her previously humble demeanor. She, however, is already looking ahead, inquiring about the specific nature of the research she is expected to conduct. She counters his skepticism by explaining her pragmatic approach. Even when confused, it is always wise to remain polite and obedient to those in power. The knight can't help but remark on how her wisdom far exceeds her youthful appearance. Despite her resolve, she remains curious about the Count's cryptic words and presses for more information. When told she has simply caught the Lord's eye, she decides that overthinking is useless and resolves to accept the situation as it is. The knight clarifies that the Count's interest isn't merely protective. He intends to place her in a position that truly utilizes her exceptional talents. Meru listens, her confusion growing as the scale of the opportunity becomes clear. He then reveals the true nature of her new role. She is to be an official apothecary serving directly under the Marquisate. The news leaves her momentarily stunned, the weight of the title sinking in. Finally, he informs her that she will be residing within the Count's own mansion. The prospect of a comfortable life and a stable environment brings a bright, hopeful smile to her face. She stares in disbelief at the lavish quarters provided for her, questioning if such extravagance is truly necessary for a simple apothecary. Standing nearby, the knight assures her that this level of treatment is only natural given her new status. He continues to explain that she doesn't seem to grasp the weight of her appointment, emphasizing that she is now a master apothecary and should be addressed with proper respect. Despite his serious tone, she privately considers herself little more than a glorified handyman. The young girl then insists that such formal titles are far too heavy for a 12-year-old, asking him to simply call her by her name or even Melia-chan. He eventually agrees, promising to fetch her when it is time for their next meal. Later, in a quiet study, Count Gerhard von Fahrenheit inquires about the new apothecary's arrival, seeking his knight's initial impressions of the girl. The knight confirms her arrival, noting that despite her excellent manners, she expressed a strong dislike for formal relationships and prefers to be addressed casually by those around her. This news brings a hearty laugh to the Count, who finds it a relief that they seem to be getting along so well. He reflects on her pragmatic view that talent is often hoarded by those in power, making further worry about her status pointless. He further reveals that she even mentioned a willingness to take on a few apprentices during her stay at the mansion. The Count gazes out the window, contemplating the weight of this offer, as he knows all too well that his domain currently lacks anyone with the necessary talent to learn from her. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere is broken as the knight begins dragging the protesting girl toward the exit, informing her that she must report to the royal palace immediately. She cries out in frustration, having only just arrived and hoping to start a quiet new life. As they walk, he explains that those with alchemical talent are strictly managed by the palace or high nobility for the good of the nation. She counters by suggesting she could simply teach them right there at the mansion, though he remains skeptical that apprentices would listen to someone so young. She continues her playful banter, suggesting that as an adult, he should try to flatter her a bit more. He remains stoic, insisting that she simply call him Blaze and admitting his distaste for dishonesty. The young girl huffs at his bluntness, calling him rude, but she quickly softens, realizing that his straightforward nature is actually a relief. She teases him about his lack of social finesse, noting that he doesn't seem particularly skilled at navigating the complexities of life, a comment he accepts with a quiet resignation as they prepare to depart. As the carriage rattles along the road toward the capital, she gazes out the window, her mind swirling with the dizzying speed of recent events. She can't help but feel a sense of regret for all the projects she had to leave unfinished, wondering how her life took such an unexpected turn toward the royal palace. Her companion inquires about her plans for the palace, prompting a list of domestic ambitions that clearly baffle him. She speaks of crafting sweets, collaborating with blacksmiths on magical tools, and even inventing appliances for heating and cooling, lamenting that she hasn't even had the chance to make sugar or cake yet. He bluntly informs her that such trivial pursuits are likely out of the question at the seat of royal power. The conversation is abruptly cut short by a violent jolt and a thunderous bang against the side of the carriage. He immediately tenses, his hand moving toward his weapon as the vehicle comes to a sudden, jarring halt. Startled by the sudden stop, she peers out into the dim light, her heart racing as she notices several dark silhouettes surrounding them. The silence that follows the initial crash is heavy with unspoken threat, leaving her to wonder what could have possibly halted their journey so close to their destination. The source of the disturbance reveals itself as a group of rough-looking men, their leader stepping forward with a menacing demand for their valuables. He tells her to stay calm and follow their instructions, though his own expression remains dangerously composed as the bandits brandish their weapons. The outlaws grow more aggressive, one of them brandishing a blade with a cruel smirk as they close in on the carriage. They seem convinced that they have found easy prey, unaware of the capabilities of the two passengers they have cornered on this lonely road. Before the situation can escalate further, she lunges forward with surprising speed, dousing the nearest attackers with a flask of liquid. Her cry of "strike first, win first" echoes through the air, catching both the bandits and her companion completely off guard by her sudden, proactive defense. The bandits stand drenched and bewildered, their leader scoffing at what appears to be a harmless splash of water. However, her defiant glare and the strange, crackling sound emanating from the liquid suggest that she has more than just a simple bath in store for their would-be muggers. She watches as the liquid reacts, sending jolts of electricity through the bandits, who collapse in a heap of groans and sparks. With the threat neutralized, she flashes a cheerful victory sign, her face beaming with pride at her successful defense. Her celebration is cut short by a sharp thud as a heavy hand descends upon her head. The warrior's voice booms with frustration, calling her an idiot for her reckless stunt. Rubbing the sore spot on her crown, she winces and protests the sudden physical reprimand. He, however, is far from apologetic, shouting that she was the one who nearly gave him a heart attack with her unpredictable tactics. He eventually lets out a weary sigh, looking over the unconscious criminals and muttering about the absurdity of the situation. She simply shrugs it off, explaining that after facing down lethal monsters for ingredients, a few petty thieves are hardly a challenge for an experienced apothecary. The two then set to work securing the captives, deciding it best to bind them and alert the local authorities rather than leaving them on the road. She handles the ropes with surprising efficiency, casually remarking that she is quite used to binding people, before quickly correcting herself to say it is simply the same technique she uses for the wild game she hunts. Once the task is complete, she and her companion continue their journey until they reach the waypoint of a curval. After reporting the incident to the local guards, she looks forward with renewed energy, eager to enjoy the peaceful scenery for the remainder of their trip to the capital. This sense of accomplishment leaves her radiating contentment as they walk through the town. She sighs happily, fully satisfied with how she handled the day's excitement. Later that evening, she finds herself sprawled across a plush bed in a high-end inn, marveling at the sheer luxury of their accommodations. Her companion remains more grounded, pointing out that such comfort is merely the standard for a professional of her standing, though she can't help but wonder if this is a taste of the pampered life awaiting her at the royal palace. She ponders aloud whether such a soft lifestyle might interfere with her alchemical craft. He responds with immediate certainty, insisting that the environment one inhabits has a profound impact on their discipline. Listening to his lecture, she hears him explain that alchemy requires precise channeling through the body's internal lines, and a sluggish, pampered physique would only disrupt that vital flow. As he considers the necessity of rigorous physical training for any future apprentices, she can only imagine the poor souls collapsing under such a demanding regime. She walks alongside her companion, her eyes bright with anticipation for the evening meal. He, however, advises her to rest first, reminding her of the long journey to the capital ahead and the need to shake off the day's fatigue before they continue their trek tomorrow. After reaching their room, she collapses onto the bed with a heavy sigh. The physical toll of the long carriage ride is finally catching up to her, and she reflects on the whirlwind of events that have transpired over the past few days. As she stares up at the ceiling, her thoughts drift back across a millennium. She remembers her master, her colleagues, and even her rivals, realizing with a pang of sadness that all their lineages have likely vanished over the 1,000 years she was gone. The realization that she can never meet their successors weighs heavily on her. It was this very sense of isolation and the desire to reconnect with her craft that initially drove her decision to take up alchemy once more in this new era. Apertando o punho com uma nova determinação, ela jura garantir que as tragédias do passado não se repitam. Ela não permitirá que a história dite seu futuro ou que seus esforços sejam em vão novamente. Eventually, exhaustion wins out, and she drifts into a deep sleep. Even in her dreams, her primary goal remains clear. She must secure the peaceful, slow life she has always desired, far from the chaos of her previous existence. The next morning, she bursts out of her room in a panic, her face a mask of pure devastation. The realization that she slept through the dinner she had been so looking forward to is a crushing blow to her spirits. Outside by the carriage, her companion can only watch with a mix of amusement and disbelief. He finds it incredible that her first words after oversleeping are a lament for a missed meal rather than concern for their travel schedule. To appease her hunger, he hands her some plain bread for breakfast. She munches on it gloomily, her disappointment evident as she realizes this simple fare is a poor substitute for the feast she had imagined. As they settle back into the carriage for the final leg of their journey, he informs her that they should reach the capital by evening. Though she grumbles about wanting better food, she eventually settles in, resigned to the long road ahead. She sat in the rattling carriage, her expression one of pure exasperation as the wooden wheels jolted over every stone. Her companion looked on in disbelief as she voiced her complaints, finding it ironic that she had previously found therein too luxurious, yet now found this fine carriage unbearable despite its cushioned seats. As the vibration continued, she began to muse aloud about the lack of rubber tires and proper suspension, concepts that left her companion utterly bewildered. He questioned what else wheels could possibly be made of besides wood and iron, unable to grasp the advanced manufacturing she described. Exhausted by the primitive technology, she slumped against the wall with a heavy sigh, half joking about the necessity of building an airship. Her companion, seeing her frustration, gently advised her to try and get some rest so she wouldn't be too tired upon their arrival. Eventually, the rhythmic swaying of the carriage lulled her into a deep slumber, her features softening as she drifted away from the discomfort of the road. Waking to the sound of her companion's voice, she realized she had managed to sleep despite the terrible comfort, a feat she attributed to the grueling work habits of her previous life. He remarked on her ability to rest in such conditions, unaware of the memories of exhaustion that fueled her resilience. The conversation drifted as they both turned their gaze toward the window, sensing that the long journey was finally drawing to a close. He informed her that they were almost there, the anticipation building within the small cabin. Her eyes widened with genuine wonder as she pressed her face against the glass, catching her first glimpse of the sprawling city ahead. The sight of the destination she had traveled so far to reach filled her with a renewed sense of excitement. The carriage crested the final hill, revealing the majestic spires and stone walls of the royal capital bathed in the afternoon sun. They had finally arrived at the heart of the kingdom, where a new chapter of their journey was set to begin. The swordsman leads Meru into a grand estate, explaining that this secondary residence of the Marquis will be her home while she works at the research building. Meru is wide-eyed at the opulence of the capital, but her stomach soon takes priority. She reminds him that she hasn't eaten since breakfast and is more than ready for dinner. As they sit for dinner, an exquisite appetizer is served, crafted from northern apples and fruit vinegar, a delicacy fit for royalty. Meru savors the flavor, her initial grumpiness fading with every bite of the high-quality meal. Blaze observes her with a hint of surprise, noting that her table manners are remarkably refined for someone of her background. Internally, Meru reflects on the stark contrast of her life, moving from the simple, humble meals of a farming family to the sophisticated courses of the nobility. She bites back a retort about her past lives, knowing she cannot reveal the truth of her reincarnation. Blaze continues the conversation, gesturing toward her as a living example of the potential he sees in her unconventional talents. He suggests that formal etiquette training might be necessary for her future, though he admits that if she maintains the same composure she showed with the Marquis, she should manage well enough. Meru listens intently, wondering if her previous encounter left a stronger impression than she realized. The conversation turns to her upcoming work, as Blaze warns her that many of the other alchemy apprentices will likely be children of noble families. He urges her to handle any interactions peacefully to avoid unnecessary conflict with the highborn candidates. She sighs, wishing the nobility would simply leave her to her own devices. Blaze quickly cautions her against voicing such blunt opinions in public, while she privately muses that for many nobles, alchemy is merely a fallback career for those with few other options. He acknowledges the difficulties of navigating noble circles, calling it an unavoidable part of their service. Meru lets out a heavy sigh, mourning the peaceful, slow life she had envisioned as she imagines the stubborn aristocrats who likely won't listen to a word she says. The next morning, she stands before the imposing gates of the research building. Looking up at the structure that represents her new life of obligation, she can only mutter a soft no way in disbelief. She found herself dressed in formal attire, a requirement for her first day at the research building. The Margrave family's impatience had forced a quick start, and as she walked alongside the knight, she couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed by the scale of the magnificent structure they were entering. Upon entering, they were greeted by a woman who introduced herself as Barbara, the research building administrator and the youngest daughter of the foreign family. The knight formally introduced the young girl as Mary Asfiel Fourleaf, the lead alchemist brought from their territory. The revelation that she was considered the lead sent a shock through her, especially as she realized Barbara was a noble woman and not a mere maid. Barbara, however, seemed impressed, noting that the girl was exactly as the rumors described before offering to show her to the laboratory. As they moved through the facility, the administrator pointed out that everything needed for potion making was readily available. The young alchemist looked around in awe at the well-stocked shelves and professional environment, encouraged to use the space as she wished. Testing the limits of these resources, she inquired about the availability of rare ingredients like moonlight herb or spirit herb. To her surprise, the administrator confirmed they were easily obtainable, further solidifying the prestige of the institution. The knight then explained that by simply filling out a form with the desired characteristics and purposes, the staff would procure any material she needed. He noted that she could focus entirely on creating top-grade potions without having to lift a finger for the logistics, a prospect that filled her with excitement. However, the casual mention of top-grade potions caused a momentary lapse in her composure. She realized the weight of the expectations placed upon her, as producing such high-quality concoctions was no small feat. Seeing her reaction, the administrator mused that if she truly possessed such skill, she would likely be expected to take on disciples. This comment caught the knight off guard, as he whispered a question about whether she could actually produce potions of that caliber. Handing over the key to the laboratory, she assured the girl that preparations were still underway and that she should feel free to reach out for anything she might need. The administrator's professional demeanor remained unshaken despite the knight's sudden skepticism. Once the administrator had departed, the young alchemist turned to her companion with a look of betrayal, reminding him that he had promised she wouldn't have to be so tense. He simply shrugged, noting that a facility of this size would naturally require a manager, leaving her to face her new responsibilities with a mix of anxiety and determination. She sighed to herself while organizing her new space, reflecting on the sheer exhaustion that came with navigating the whims of the nobility. It seemed far simpler to just offer a polite yes to everything they said rather than trying to reason with them. Turning to her companion, she explained the nuances of her craft, noting that while common healing grass sufficed for intermediate drafts, the addition of moonlight and spirit herbs would allow her to produce top-grade elixirs. When the swordsman remarked on how straightforward it sounded, she quickly corrected him, detailing the complex quadruple synthesis required for such a feat. He then shifted the conversation to her recent visit to the Commerce Guild, inquiring about her activities there. He warned her that someone had been tailing her, meaning her methods were likely no longer a secret to those watching from the shadows. Despite the warning, she remained upbeat, declaring that an alchemist must always strive for efficiency to ensure a peaceful future. Nearby, a hidden observer watched her with a mix of skepticism and amusement, noting that her modest production rate was quite naive given her actual capabilities. Moments later, she proudly presented a freshly brewed potion, though her companion warned that her high efficiency would only invite more work. He carefully inspected the vial, noting the intricate adjustments she had made to the water temperature during the process to ensure the best possible result. She grew defensive when discussing the limitations of her materials, explaining that even her skills couldn't overcome the poor quality of common herbs. To achieve true excellence, she insisted that materials must be either perfectly fresh or expertly dried immediately after harvest. Otherwise, the synthesis would always be flawed. Determined to improve her results, she began filling out a request form for the specific herb she needed, intending to submit it to the reception desk. Her companion suggested she also specify the required storage methods to ensure the plants remained in peak condition until she was ready to use them. Upon reaching the reception, she casually presented her work to the administrator, Barbara, as a mere sample to demonstrate the relationship between herb freshness and potion quality. Barbara stared at the vials in stunned silence, recognizing them as top-tier intermediate potions that were far too valuable to be treated so lightly. The administrator's professional facade crumbled as she leaned over the desk, her voice rising in a mix of shock and reprimand. She commanded that such precious items never be left unattended again, leaving the young alchemist startled by the sudden intensity of the woman's reaction. As they walked away, she remarked that she was finally starting to feel at home in the research building. Her companion couldn't help but ask if she was actually realizing just how reckless and thoughtless her casual display of skill had been. She leaned back against the vibrating wall of the carriage, feeling every jolt of the uneven road. Beside her, Blaze noted that they had managed to complete the journey without any major incidents, though he noticed her obvious fatigue. She sighed, lamenting the slow pace and the physical toll of the trip, wishing for a more efficient power source than horses to make such travels less of a burden on the body. Suddenly, a spark of inspiration lit up her eyes as she proposed the idea of a carriage powered by magic stones instead of beasts. The sudden outburst caught Blaze off guard, his eyes widening in shock at the sheer audacity of the concept. He questioned where such technology would even come from, noting that while the capital had skilled craftsmen, creating such precise machinery was a monumental task. She was already lost in a vision of a full-scale industrial revolution, imagining steamships, railways, and automated mills transforming the world. The prospect of bringing such advanced technology to life filled her with an irrepressible excitement. Upon arriving at the royal capital, they made their way to a bustling workshop to meet Ted, a renowned blacksmith. Blaze introduced the young alchemist, and though Ted was surprised by her youthful appearance, he welcomed them warmly, mentioning it had been some time since he last saw the knight for sword maintenance. She began to explain her needs, detailing the various magic tools she had commissioned in the past, from heating elements to food preservation storage. She expressed her desire to collaborate with a smith of his caliber to push the boundaries of what was possible with magical engineering. The blacksmith stared at the blueprints she provided, his professional composure momentarily shattered by the complexity of the designs. He realized immediately that he was dealing with someone extraordinary, as the concept for these magic tools were unlike anything he had ever encountered in his years at the forge. While he marveled at the plans, she produced a spear she used for self-defense, asking if he could also handle its maintenance. He accepted the task with a confident grin, assuring her that such a request was simple work for a man of his skill. He took the weapon into his hands, his eyes narrowing as he inspected the fine craftsmanship of the blade. Both he and Blaze were struck by the quality of the piece, realizing that even her defensive equipment was of an exceptionally high standard. She then revealed her intention to gather spirit herbs, casually mentioning that they typically grow near dragon nests. The statement left the men speechless, as they struggled to reconcile her calm demeanor with the suicidal recklessness of venturing into such dangerous territory for mere ingredients. She remained undeterred by their shock, shifting the conversation to the potential cost of a sword that could match the quality of her spear. Ted could only watch in disbelief, wondering if she truly understood the magnitude of the danger she was planning to walk into. She watched as the blacksmith calculated the costs, his voice booming with a mix of professional assessment and disbelief. Ted explained that for the level of durability she required, joking that she must be planning to hunt a dragon, the price would reach a staggering 100 gold coins. In response to the steep price, she simply offered a serene, confident smile, assuring him that she was more than willing to provide the necessary support for such a task. With her mind made up, she declared that they would proceed with no budget limits whatsoever, buoyed by the significant profits from her recent auction sales, and even added a request for a custom sword to the order. This sudden escalation left the craftsman momentarily stunned, but she leaned in with a mischievous glint in her eye, asking if he wasn't interested in pushing his skills to their absolute peak for once. The challenge ignited a fire in him, and he roared with enthusiasm, promising to forge his ultimate masterpiece, the Reze sword, by magically binding lightning itself into the finest blade he could produce. Moments later, as she navigated the bustling streets of the capital, she stopped to inspect a small item in her palm, her brow furrowing in sudden bewilderment. As they continued their walk, she chatted with her knightly companion, rationalizing her extravagant spending as a way to help the local economy, even as she privately lamented how easily she had been distracted from her original goals. Once she returned to the solitude of her room, the weight of the day finally caught up to her, and she collapsed onto her desk with a heavy, exhausted sigh. She stared at her workspace, contemplating the slow life she had envisioned. Without the rare moonlight herb, her alchemical pursuits felt stagnant, reduced to churning out the same intermediate potions day after day. Her quiet reflection was shattered when the door was flung open with a violent crash, and the research administrator burst inside, her face pale with urgency as she called out for her. She delivers the news with a sense of urgency, informing the young alchemist that her supposed disciples are already approaching. The revelation leaves the girl stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief, while the knight nearby observes that the very complications she feared have manifested sooner than expected. Without giving her a moment to process the shock, the administrator begins ushering her toward the door, insisting that her current practical apron is entirely unsuitable for the arrival of the Count's son. Despite the girl's protests about the suddenness of it all, she is swept along by the older woman's determined pace to be properly outfitted for the meeting. As she is hurried along, a sense of dread begins to take hold, leading her to question the wisdom of accepting disciples without any prior consultation. She frets over the lack of choice in the matter, feeling that such a significant responsibility should have been discussed with her first, while the sword saint remains a silent, composed observer of her mounting anxiety. A heavy sigh escapes her as the weight of the situation settles in, her expression clouding with a mixture of exhaustion and resignation. Despite her misgivings, the meeting commences, bringing her face to face with a freckled young noble and a focused young woman who are to be her students. While a part of her hopes for a smooth transition into this new role, an underlying intuition warns her that significant trouble is already brewing on the horizon. She introduces herself with a bright smile, confirming her identity as the chief alchemist serving directly under the Marquis. The revelation leaves the three candidates stunned, their eyes wide as they process the fact that such a young girl holds such a prestigious position. Despite her outward confidence, her heart thumps loudly against her ribs, a secret nervousness she hopes remains hidden. Barbara watches from the side, noting the young girl's internal struggle even as she maintains her professional composure. The young alchemist watches as the administrator steps forward to vouch for her. Barbara firmly instructs the candidates to show proper respect to their predecessor, emphasizing that despite her age, the girl has a proven track record of creating advanced-level potions. She then turns to the first two candidates, who greet her with polite bows and sincere expressions. Watching from the doorway, the knight observes the exchange, feeling relieved that at least some of the chosen apprentices seem to be honest and well-mannered individuals. She listens as they introduce themselves as Lyle and Alma, explaining their earnest desire to become alchemists who can truly help people. While they admit they never expected their master to be younger than them, they express a genuine willingness to learn under her guidance. She is met with blatant disbelief from the third candidate, a young noble named Eddie, who scoffs at the situation. He points a finger accusingly, declaring it impossible for a commoner girl to possess the skill required to manufacture advanced-level concoctions. In the face of his arrogance, The administrator reminds him that the Marquis himself has guaranteed her skills. Eddie remains stubborn, arguing from his own experience that alchemy is not something that can be mastered at such a tender age, regardless of who provides the recommendation. He is left speechless and trembling as she produces a vial of top-quality advanced potion from her pouch. The sight of the shimmering liquid leaves his mind reeling at the impossibility of her carrying such a rare and valuable item so casually. He and the others finally begin to accept her authority as she suggests they move on to the main topic of their meeting. With the skeptics silenced by the undeniable proof of her talent, the young alchemist takes charge, the atmosphere in the room shifting from doubt to quiet amazement. She stands in the research building courtyard, addressing the 3 candidates and explaining that she will test each of them individually to see if their resonance aligns with hers, as only those capable of the knowledge transfer ritual can become her apprentices. She remains blunt with the group, warning them that there's a high probability none of them will be a match, and that they should not take the rejection personally if they're not chosen. Continuing her explanation, she describes the ritual as a way for a master and apprentice to share a collective consciousness known as the archive, a concept that leaves the students imagining a vast, mystical library. Through this system, she elaborates, alchemists inherit generations of refined knowledge and experience via the Earth's ley lines, potentially bringing an apprentice's knowledge up to her own level. However, the noble boy, Eddie, scoffs at the idea, finding it utterly preposterous. He is ignored as she clarifies that her own ability to craft high-level potions isn't just personal talent, but the result of standing on the shoulders of all the alchemists who came before her through this very archive. When she asks for a volunteer to test their compatibility immediately, Eddie steps forward, determined to prove she is lying, and follows her instruction to kneel and meditate on the grass. The ritual ignites with a violent magical backlash, a deafening boom throwing both of them backward as she realizes their compatibility is catastrophically poor. Enraged and convinced of a trick, he lunges at her with a snarl, but she nimbly steps aside, letting his own momentum send him crashing into the dirt. Before he can strike again, a firm hand grips his shoulder as the sword saint intervenes, his calm voice cutting through the tension to command an end to the outburst. He watches as the humiliated noble flees the courtyard, shouting threats of exposure, while the warrior offers his sincere apologies to the young alchemist and the administrator for the disruption. She laughs nervously, trying to brush off the tension Eddie left behind. She admits she should have mentioned earlier that trust is just as vital as resonance for the ritual to succeed, as the bond between master and apprentice is the foundation of their craft. Because they're complete strangers, she explains that the chances of success were naturally lower than usual. While the ritual is typically performed between blood relatives due to their inherent connection, she notes that exceptions do exist for those with a deep enough understanding. The young alchemist reflects on her own journey, noting that her master was not a blood relative either. Instead, they were bound by shared aspirations and a profound mutual understanding that transcended family ties. Turning back to the remaining 2 candidates, she encourages them, stating that as long as their resonance is compatible, they can build the necessary relationship from this point forward to ensure the archive's safety. This prospect delights the short-haired girl, who enthusiastically declares her readiness, privately noting that a kind and charming master is far preferable to a frightening one. Her companion, however, becomes flustered, stammering that his excitement stems from the rare opportunity itself rather than any personal feelings toward their potential teacher, though his blushing face suggests otherwise. Seeing their resolve, the young girl hardens her own, driven by the desire to become a master alchemist and save as many lives as possible. With a final nod of agreement, they prepare to start the test. The air grows still as she initiates the connection, placing her hands upon them to test the flow of their internal energies and search for a harmonious match. A surge of light confirms the result. The freckled youth possesses the necessary compatibility to become her apprentice, a revelation that leaves him beaming with pure joy while his peer looks on in shock. The administrator offers her congratulations, noting that his resonance is remarkably close to the girl's own, ensuring that the ancient knowledge of the archive can finally be passed to a new generation. Once she has finished processing their paperwork, the young mentor explains the next step of their journey. La will live with her to build the bond necessary for the ritual. He responds with a mix of nervousness and determination, asking for her guidance. Shortly after, she sits with him for a meal in the garden. She playfully offers him a bite of food, but he blushes deeply, insisting he can manage on his own. Despite his hesitation, he eventually gives in. She encourages him, noting that such small acts of acceptance are vital for their connection. Their interaction draws the attention of the sword saint, who watches with a hint of suspicion. He questions the propriety of them living together, prompting a light-hearted exchange where she laughs off his concerns while he grumbles about potentially banning male apprentices in the future. She insists her methods are gentle, though the warrior remains unconvinced, labeling her approach as somewhat forceful. Amidst the banter, he remains quiet, his mind racing. He questions whether he truly deserves such kindness and attention. He voices his concern, stating a desire to earn her trust properly. She simply smiles, telling him there is no need for such worries. She goes on to explain the significance of their bond, noting that their compatible resonance is proof of shared ideals. It is a sign that the ancient archive itself has already accepted him as a worthy successor. Looking at him with genuine warmth, she admits that while their time together has been short, she already feels he is the only right choice for this path. She concludes with a playful yet firm declaration, stating she has no intention of letting him go. To her, finding someone so compatible so quickly can only be described as fate. She announces that the break is over, signaling the start of their practical training. Lau responds with an enthusiastic affirmation, while Blaze watches from the side, reflecting on how he had worried about the duration of this process. He closes his eyes for a moment, realizing that things might actually be resolved much faster than he had originally anticipated. High above, the clouds drift lazily across the sky as the appointed time for the ritual finally arrives. She reassures the nervous young man, telling him that even if the attempt fails this time, she will handle the consequences. Alma offers her own words of encouragement, and Meru instructs Lyle to begin meditating so they can finally test their compatibility through the ritual. As the ritual commences, a sudden, powerful gust of wind swirls around them, marking the moment of connection. She maintains a sharp, focused gaze, feeling the resonance begin to take hold. They are both stunned to find that it worked perfectly on the first try, a feat that leaves Alma breathless. She explains that connecting to the archive usually requires a deep, family-like bond and rarely happens so quickly. He admits to a strange new sensation, feeling as though his master is constantly right beside him. She confirms this, explaining that sharing the archive means always sensing the other person's presence, while Blaze looks on, confident that his decision to push for this was the right one. She continues the conversation by teasing him, suggesting that while he is fine, she would need the mental strength of a mother with a massive family if she were to take on any more students. He can only wonder what she could possibly mean by such a comparison. He begins to dream of the future, realizing that with this new connection, he will finally be able to create even more incredible potions than before. She quickly adds a new condition to his apprenticeship, declaring that he must also learn to bake delicious cookies. She explains that while potions can heal the body, a truly fulfilling life, encompassing food, clothing, and shelter, is necessary to heal the heart, prompting a determined, if slightly overwhelmed, promise from him to do his best. She beams with pride as her new apprentice expresses a desire to replicate her baking, his eyes sparkling with admiration for her skills. Beside them, the stoic warrior watches the exchange, perhaps hoping for a few snacks himself. Turning her full attention to the young man, she offers a gentle but firm piece of advice, reminding him that maintaining peace of mind is essential, no matter how overwhelming his duties become. She warns that without it, the path ahead becomes treacherous. As she finishes her warning, the serious moment is quickly broken as the sword saint playfully pinches the boy's cheek, teasing him about working himself to death while she looks on with a lighthearted laugh. Though she joins in the laughter, her thoughts drift to the weight of her responsibility. She is determined to pass her knowledge and this newfound joy to her apprentice, ensuring that he and those who follow will never suffer the tragic ends of the alchemists who came before. Standing together beneath the sprawling branches of a great tree, the trio looks out toward a future where the history of their craft will be written anew, free from the shadows of the past. As a single, withered leaf drifts slowly to the earth, it marks the end of one era and the quiet, hopeful beginning of a legacy that will finally be carried forward. Lyle is gasping for air, his face flushed from exertion after a grueling training session. Meru approaches him with a kind smile, offering a word of encouragement and a small token of support for his hard work, while Alma stands nearby, observing the young man's dedication. Despite his efforts, the quality of his latest creation was only standard, a fact that Eddie points out with a hint of disdain. He finds it hard to believe that the boy has been subjecting himself to such rigorous endurance training, especially after seeing the results of his intermediate potion. She explains that while the archive grants vast knowledge, building a body capable of handling mana flow requires genuine physical effort. Eddie, however, remains skeptical, noting that the boy doesn't exactly look like a paragon of fitness despite the claims of hard work. To become a true alchemist, she insists that self-defense is a mandatory skill. She reminds them that the knowledge within the archive isn't limited to brewing. It includes the refined techniques of those who fought monsters while searching for rare materials in the wild. He is encouraged to find a combat style that suits his specific physical abilities, whether it be mastering martial arts or enhancing weapons with magic. The young man agrees to explore different methods to find his own path forward. The conversation shifts to his living arrangements, with Meru questioning why he doesn't stay at the Marquis estate. Blaze explains the delicate political balance, noting that there is pressure to prevent the Marquis from monopolizing all the talented apprentices in the region. Meanwhile, the Count reflects on the rumors that blood relatives inherit abilities more easily, a concern that grows as the boy nears adulthood. He weighs the options of assigning guards or bringing the youth to his private estate to ensure his safety and development. The mention of family leaves the young man in a pensive mood, as he realizes he has no blood relatives to speak of. The concept of adulthood and the expectations that come with it feel like a distant and uncertain milestone. Back at the research building, the discussion turns to the immense burden of passing on the archive's knowledge, which takes at least a decade to fully settle. Meru becomes visibly flustered when the topic of raising a child to inherit the knowledge is brought up, her face turning a bright shade of red at the implication. She is then struck with disbelief when she learns that provincial nobles are flooding them with requests to send their own apprentice candidates. The sudden surge in interest and the political complications it brings leave both her and Blaze feeling completely overwhelmed. She walks alongside her companions, her thoughts drifting to Alma and wondering how she is faring. Beside her, the knight remarks on the growing weight of their responsibilities, noting that things might have been simpler if Alma had also become an apprentice. Reflecting on her friend's situation, she realizes there is little cause for concern, as Alma is currently under the protection of a noble in her role as a pharmacist. Still, a sense of curiosity lingers about what her friend might be doing at this very moment. Suddenly, she calls out to the freckled youth, halting their progress to present him with a small, wrapped gift. He is visibly taken aback by the gesture, expressing his gratitude with a bright, surprised smile as he accepts the offering. As he unwraps the package, a pleasant scent wafts through the air, leading him to wonder if it is some kind of exotic snack. She quickly corrects him, explaining that it is handmade soap, a revelation that leaves him stunned by the sheer luxury of such an item. He stares at the gift in disbelief, questioning if such a refined product could truly be created through the art of alchemy. She confirms his suspicion, noting that while it is possible, the alchemical process certainly makes the task far more efficient. She then dives into a detailed explanation of the craft, describing how she combines fragrant herbs and vegetable oil with a sodium hydroxide solution extracted from salt water. The final step, she explains, involves pouring the mixture into a mold and allowing it to set until it reaches the perfect consistency. Continuing her lecture, she points out the superiority of her creation, explaining that while market-bought soap is often made from animal fat and lye, her alchemical version solidifies more easily and carries a much more pleasant aroma. The knight listens to the exchange before turning to the young disciple, urging him never to cease his exploration of the archive's depths. The youth sighs, admitting that even with access to the same vast well of knowledge, he feels he can barely keep pace with her intuitive mastery. Her mind begins to wander toward future projects, contemplating the development of a new recipe. She wonders silently if the boy would have preferred a sweet treat as a reward instead of the practical gift of soap. When she impulsively voices her desire to start a new project, the knight eyes her with a healthy dose of skepticism, suggesting she simply wants an excuse to indulge her own sweet tooth. She quickly protests, her face flushing as she insists her motivations are purely professional. She watches as Blaze vigorously whisks a bowl of cream in the Marquis's kitchen, his determination evident as he refuses to stop until the texture is perfect. Just as the effort begins to show, Klaus, the mansion's head chef, steps in to offer his professional expertise, demonstrating the precise moment when the cream forms stiff peaks. The result of their labor is a plate of delicate raspberry cookie sandwiches, which the group eagerly begins to sample. He is stunned by the transformation, noting that while he has used cream in savory dishes, he never realized it could become such a light, airy confection known as whipped cream. Despite the success, she finds the flavor slightly lacking in sweetness, though she acknowledges that sugar is a rare luxury and other sweeteners might overpower the delicate cream. This observation prompts Klaus to suggest seeking out local alternatives like sugar beets or sweet roots that could be processed to extract their essence. Excited by the possibilities, she encourages the chef to delve into further research, promising to share more of her culinary knowledge with him. With a cheerful smile, she entrusts the task to Klaus, who accepts the challenge with professional pride while Blaze looks on, impressed by the exchange. However, seeing the physical toll the manual whisking took on her companion, she resolves to create a mechanical solution, a mixer. She begins to visualize the components needed, considering the use of permanent magnets and raw materials from the blacksmith to construct a motor-driven device that would revolutionize their kitchen work. She began by meticulously planning the process, envisioning how to use alchemy to liquefy copper and pour it into a paper funnel to create the necessary wiring. Her mental blueprint was clear: insulate an iron rod, wrap it in the newly formed copper wire, and then use a lightning magic stone to induce a permanent magnetic field. Putting her theory into practice, she marveled at the ease with which alchemy could manipulate metals at room temperature, allowing her to produce a wire of incredible fineness. The liquid metal flowed perfectly, solidifying into the delicate thread she required for her experiment. As she began the final step, the sharp scent of ozone and singed paper filled the room, drawing the attention of Blaze, who peered in with concern. Ignoring the slight charring, she focused entirely on the lightning magic stone, channeling its volatile energy through the coiled wire. With a triumphant cry, she held up the finished product, her eyes sparkling with joy as she announced the successful creation of a permanent magnet. Beside her, the young knight could only stare in silent bewilderment at the small, unassuming rod that had caused such a commotion. However, her excitement was tempered by a practical realization. The raw power of a lightning magic stone was far too unstable for a sustained mechanical motor. While the theory of using a coil and switch to drive a motor was sound, she decided to shelve the project until a more reliable energy source could be secured. Sensing her shift in mood, Blaze questioned the utility of such a device, noting that its only apparent function was to point toward a fixed direction. He suggested they put the parts away for now, unsure of what practical application a simple directional tool could possibly have. She turned to him in utter disbelief, her voice rising as she realized that the concept of a compass was entirely unknown in this world. The thought that travelers had no reliable way to orient themselves without clear skies was a shocking revelation to her. She quickly explained how such a tool would revolutionize travel, providing a constant guide for sailors on the open sea or scouts lost in the depths of a sunless forest. As the weight of her words sank in, the knight looked at the magnet with newfound respect, realizing the strategic value of what he had initially dismissed. Recognizing the potential impact of her work, he advised her to seek a patent, reminding her that the Marquis was keen on protecting the rights to any of her inventions. He noted that between this and her previous work with soap and medicine, she was quickly becoming a prolific creator. While the prospect of licensing fees and commercialization was appealing, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt, knowing that these inventions were merely applications of knowledge from her previous life. Nevertheless, she recognized the benefit of formalizing her contributions to ensure they were used effectively. She reflects on the implications of her work, deciding that if these inventions make the world even a little more convenient, then they are undoubtedly a good thing. Inside the research building, a sudden shout of excitement rings out as Barbara holds up a document, her eyes wide with anticipation at the prospect of a patent application. Blaze and the others watch her outburst, with the knight suggesting that she might be overreacting to the news. She quickly counters his skepticism, explaining that after being told for so long that their research yielded no results, this breakthrough is a monumental achievement. While Blaze admits he initially thought the compass was more suited for an apothecary, Alma remains in awe of the incredible alchemy that made it possible. Meanwhile, the young alchemist considers the broader potential of her creations, specifically the soap she desires for herself but finds too difficult to produce in bulk. She muses that if someone could turn it into a business using a patent, it would solve her problem, though she realizes that while she has the alchemy handled, she will need to consult the commercial guilds for mass production. Looking over the documents, the administrator notes that both the soap and the compass are designed to be reproducible even without the use of alchemy. Alma points out that she included specific details in the application about using dried seaweed to achieve this, ensuring the inventions can be manufactured by ordinary craftsmen. She confidently assures the group that they can leave the rest of the business arrangements to her, firmly believing that the products are of such high quality that the venture is bound to succeed. Meru looks on with a smile, placing her full trust in her friend's administrative expertise. Later, in the bustling city streets, Blaze and Meru run into Ted the blacksmith, who is in the middle of his workday. He greets them warmly and mentions that he is currently teaching a newcomer, offering to introduce his latest apprentice to them. She is struck with disbelief when the newcomer turns out to be Alma, who is equally shocked to see her friend there. Ted is caught off guard by their mutual recognition, revealing that the young woman had been a candidate for his apprenticeship. The young girl is utterly confused, questioning why Alma is working as a blacksmith's apprentice when she was supposed to be a promising apothecary. She wonders what could have possibly led to such a drastic change in career paths. She sheepishly explains the situation, admitting with a nervous laugh that she was actually fired from her position as an apothecary. Left with few options, she decided to pivot and try her hand at blacksmithing instead, much to the surprise of her friends. She expresses a desire to experience new things, a sentiment that resonates deeply with Meru, who reflects on the weight of her own multiple lives and how such a perspective hits close to home. Observing the exchange, Blaze notes how dazzling her youth is, prompting a small, flustered reaction from Meru as she internally compares her own age to the younger girl's energy. Ted chimes in with a grin, warning his apprentice that flattery won't earn her a raise, though she quickly credits him for his tireless help throughout the day. The group gathers in the center of the workshop, the heat of the forge surrounding them as they prepare for the next reveal. Breaking the casual chatter, the blacksmith informs Meru that her specific request has been fulfilled, sparking a wave of excitement in the young girl. He then unveils a massive, intricately designed blade, which Blaze holds aloft. It is the legendary Reze sword, shimmering with latent power. She proudly explains the sword's unique features, highlighting the 3 magic stones that empower it with lightning and exceptional durability, much to the master smith's own amazement at the design. The swordsman gazes at the heavy weapon with a mix of awe and doubt, questioning whether he possesses the strength to wield such a formidable and weighty tool. Seeing his hesitation, she clarifies that the sword is a gift intended solely for him, leaving the warrior speechless with shock. He attempts to refuse the incredibly valuable item, but she remains firm, pointing out that it has already been paid for and that returning it would be an unnecessary burden for everyone involved. He gazed at the masterwork in his hands, the weight of the gift prompting a humble admission of the debt he now carried. Meru brushed the sentiment aside with a bright, dismissive smile, her mind already racing toward the practical. With a surge of infectious energy, she declared that they should test the blade's cutting power without delay. Standing by, the blacksmith and his disciple shared in the anticipation, their faces alight with the shared desire to see the Reze sword's true potential unleashed. They have traveled to the outskirts of the royal capital, a distance that puzzles the young alchemist. She wonders if being this far away will make it difficult to observe the test but the swordsman assures her that the reason for the distance will become clear soon enough. He takes his stance, gripping the hilt of the newly forged blade with intense focus. With a sharp exhale, he prepares to unleash the weapon's true potential. The resulting strike is cataclysmic, tearing through the landscape with a roar of displaced air and shattered earth. While the girl cheers in triumph at the success of her creation, the blacksmith and his disciple stand frozen, terrified by the sheer destructive force that far exceeded their wildest imaginations. Instead of celebrating, the warrior turns on her with a frustrated shout, demanding to know if she is a fool. He bellows that the strike didn't just fell a tree. It cleaved an entire hillside in two, a level of power that is utterly absurd for a single weapon. He sighs, his shoulders sagging as he declares the weapon a waste because its power is too great to be used safely, suggesting it must be locked away. The young alchemist can only watch, her heart sinking as she realizes her hard work might be for naught. The man remains slumped in visible disappointment, the weight of the unusable power pressing down on him. She watches him with a mix of pity and resignation, acknowledging that the situation is truly unfortunate. His disciple, Alma, attempts to find a middle ground, suggesting that the sword is perfectly safe as long as the magic stone remains inactive. He considers this, his expression softening as he admits she has a point. Seeking to lighten the mood, the blacksmith asks to borrow the warrior's cloak, noting that his current appearance is a bit too intimidating for the public. Seeing an opportunity to help, the girl takes the garment and quickly modifies it, expanding the inner pocket into a functional magic bag. The swordsman is genuinely impressed by the practical enchantment. As they prepare to depart, she warmly invites Alma to visit her for sweets sometime, hoping to build a friendship. However, the other girl notices a flicker of exhaustion or worry in the alchemist's eyes, sensing that something is weighing on her. The blacksmith walks beside her, offering a gentle warning that she must take breaks to avoid burning out. She acknowledges his concern, but remains quietly determined, knowing she still has so much to learn about her craft. She remains tireless, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm as she discusses the day's tasks. A young man nearby watches in disbelief, noting that she hasn't taken a single break despite the heavy workload. She simply beams, viewing the opportunity to interact with customers and contribute to the shop as a reward in itself. Seeing her handle everything from enchanted swords to spatial bags with such ease, the young man admits he's lost track of what a traditional apothecary is supposed to be. Her versatility is as impressive as it is unconventional. He tentatively asks if she might be able to craft magic tools for him as well, recalling that as a former apprentice candidate, she must have a solid foundation in alchemy. However, his expression soon darkens as he confesses the reason for his current situation. He was fired from his previous position. He asks her to understand the weight of that failure without him having to say more. He continues his somber reflection, explaining that a person of great importance told him he lacked the necessary talent. Despite his ability to manipulate ley lines, it wasn't enough to secure a future as her fellow apprentice. Because of this rejection, he decided to pivot his life entirely, seeking a new path as a blacksmith's apprentice. He looks to her for some sign of understanding as he describes this difficult transition. Hearing this, Master Ted steps in with a boisterous laugh, praising the young man's grit and declaring that he values raw enthusiasm far more than innate talent. He promises to train the promising rookie personally, and as the days pass, the workshop begins to feel like a place of true growth. Elsewhere, she finds herself in a moment of pure bliss, her face lighting up as she tastes a truly exquisite dish. The flavors are so intense and wonderful that she can't help but exclaim her delight to the chef standing nearby. Looking over the spread of chiffon cakes and lemon tarts, she expresses her genuine shock at how quickly the culinary arts have evolved in such a short time. She modestly insists that her own skills could never have produced something so refined. The chef, Klaus, is quick to credit her, noting that it was her recipes, specialized cooking tools, and the introduction of high-quality sugar that made these delicacies possible. In return for her contributions, he vows to support her by providing the best food he can create. He had left the kitchen in capable hands, allowing the young girl to share her secrets of sweetness with the others. Meru explained to the short-haired disciple that the high-quality sugar was a gift from the Marquis family, derived from a specific type of noble tuber they had discovered as a raw power source. She looked at the massive pile of raw materials, wondering if there was any way to process them without relying solely on alchemy. Given the sheer volume of work ahead, she considered asking for assistance from her fellow student, Lyle, to help manage the extraction. She confessed a deep-seated desire to master the alchemical arts herself, though she felt it was out of reach. Meru noted that while manual extraction was possible, it was extremely labor-intensive and often resulted in impure sugar that lacked the refined quality needed for delicate Western pastries. She took a moment to enjoy the fruits of their labor, her eyes lighting up as she bit into a sweet treat. Meru reassured her that she should enjoy her break without worry, even as the girl pleaded for guidance, hoping to learn the secrets of the craft. She suddenly recoiled in doubt, insisting that she possessed no natural talent for such complex tasks. Despite Meru pointing out her proven ability to manipulate ley lines, the young disciple remained convinced that the feat was impossible for someone like her. The young mentor reminded her that her very presence as a disciple candidate was proof of her potential. The girl looked down, admitting that her confidence was shaken by her past failures to properly brew even a standard mid-level potion. The girl explained that while complex potions required a dozen different stages of refinement, from cooling and fixation to medicinal extraction, sugar extraction was a far simpler process. It lacked the grueling requirements of temperature adjustment and precise timing that made other alchemy so daunting. Her eyes sparkled with newfound determination as she declared her desire to attempt the process herself. Meru smiled, offering to guide her, while the disciple reflected on how the lack of written records from past masters had left their entire generation struggling in the dark. Their first attempt, however, yielded a bitter result that left them both grimacing in disappointment. It was a stark reminder that without the guidance of ancient archives, they would have to rely on their own intuition and endless trial and error to succeed. Undeterred by the initial failure, they returned to the workbench to face the pile of tubers once more. With a shared look of resolve, they prepared to begin the process again, determined to master the art of sweetness through persistence. She waits patiently as the hours tick by, until a sudden cry of excitement breaks the silence. Alma has done it, her eyes wide with disbelief as she presents the results of her labor. Looking closely at the small pile of dark crystals, the young alchemist notes that while the quality is still a bit lacking, the fact that her student managed a successful extraction on the very first day is nothing short of impressive. She offers a warm smile of encouragement, reminding her pupil that there is still plenty of room for growth and refinement in her craft. A blush creeps across the girl's face as she realizes the truth in those words, her heart swelling with a newfound sense of accomplishment. Later that evening, the young mentor returns to the blacksmith's workshop, announcing her arrival with a cheerful greeting and a small gift of sweets she brought as a souvenir. With a proud beam, she reveals that she successfully extracted sugar, prompting the blacksmith to gratefully accept the treats, intending to share them with his family. As the exchange continues, the master smith glances over at his young apprentice, who stands nearby with a look of quiet contemplation. Wishing them a pleasant night, she heads off to rest, leaving the blacksmith to marvel at the rare sugar treats she provided, his curiosity piqued by her enthusiastic recommendation. Alone in the quiet of the night, she gazes out at the stars, a sense of quiet confidence washing over her as she reaffirms her own capabilities in the art of alchemy. Meanwhile, the apprentice reflects on his master's philosophy that enthusiasm carries more weight than raw talent, finding the resolve to face his forge with renewed determination when the sun rises. He looks up in concern, noticing a fresh, dark mark on his master's forehead and questioning what could have caused such an injury. In response, Ted explains that the sweets Meru provided as a souvenir were so delicious they caused a literal riot at home, with his wife and daughter fighting over them like wild animals. While Meru expresses her delight that the treats were well received, Ted shifts the conversation, asking if he might borrow Alma's assistance for a future project involving sugar extraction. This request catches Meru off guard, especially as Ted expresses doubt about Alma's alchemical abilities, suggesting she might be a lost cause in that field. With a knowing smile, the blacksmith reflects on Alma's tendency to be considerate in her own peculiar way, mentioning that he had shared some of his own knowledge with her recently. Taking this information to heart, Meru later approaches Alma, who is busy with her chores, to ask for a specific favor. When she reveals she knows about her alchemical skills and asks for help, Alma is visibly shaken, frantically trying to maintain her cover as a simple blacksmith's apprentice. Her attempts at secrecy crumble as she realizes the truth is out, with Ted casually admitting that he was the one who informed Meru of her hidden talents. Resigning herself to the fact that her secret is no longer safe, Alma sighs, acknowledging that keeping things hidden hasn't done her any good, and asks Meru to clarify what is required of her. She finally admits her capability in alchemy with a sheepish apology, though Ted quickly interjects to clarify that his original request wasn't quite what she assumed. She stands before her mentor, listening as he places the choice of her future squarely in her hands. He assures her that he will respect whatever path she takes, urging her not to feel burdened by their short time together, as his training was never meant to chain her to the forge. Because of his kind words, she feels a surge of gratitude, reminding him that he was the one who gave her a chance when she had nothing but her own drive. He smiles, admitting that he has already discussed the matter with Maria-chan, referring to her as a truly promising talent who deserves to see more of the world. Outside, the young alchemist gives a cheerful sign of agreement, confirming the arrangement. The blacksmith laughs, joking that having his former student out in the world might even bring more business his way, before revealing that he was the one who personally asked for her to be hired. She gazes at him, her voice barely a whisper as she addresses him as boss one last time. He offers a warm, encouraging look, gently reminding her that her new employer is waiting just outside the door to begin their journey. Overwhelmed by the weight of the moment, her eyes shimmer with unshed tears and a faint blush of emotion. With a final, respectful bow, she acknowledges everything he has done for her. He watches her depart with a fond, honest expression, knowing she is heading toward a bright new chapter. As the two girls walk side by side into the bustling street, he lingers at the threshold, reflecting on the spirited rookie who is now taking her first real step toward the future. A few days after Alma decided to change her path, she officially begins her new role as an assistant. Meru welcomes her with open arms, expressing her genuine excitement for the work they will accomplish together in the days ahead. She then turns to Lyle, instructing him to act as a mentor and guide for the newcomer. While Alma is eager to give it her all, Lyle feels a slight pang of awkwardness, realizing he is now the senior to someone who is actually older than himself. The young alchemist explains that their journey will start with small tasks, gradually expanding into the complexities of alchemy. She warns that the path to brewing potions is long, requiring a solid foundation of knowledge, physical training, and even self-defense. She emphasizes that there is no need to rush, as they're tracing over 1,000 years of history stored within the archives. Steady and patient progress is the only way to truly master such ancient and profound wisdom. Turning the conversation to practical skills, she points out that Alma already possesses a unique talent. Right now, her specialty lies in the delicate process of extracting sugar, a task she performs with incredible focus and dedication. The results of this hard work are evident, as she managed to transform a massive pile of sweet potatoes into pure sugar in just one day. Her efficiency is so remarkable that it even surpasses Lyle's current capabilities in that specific field, much to his chagrin. To celebrate this achievement, a grand reward is presented, a table laden with exquisite sweets. The sight of the beautifully crafted cakes and pastries brings a look of pure wonder and delight to the faces of the young disciples. They learn that these treats were prepared by Klaus, who was inspired by the high-quality sugar they provided. He poured his heart into the baking, finding immense joy in working with such superior ingredients from the Marquisite's domain. As Barbara arrives with fresh tea, the conversation shifts to the incredible culinary talent Klaus possesses. He has not only mastered the ancient recipes from the archives, but has also begun adding his own creative twist to them, ensuring the future of food is in good hands. She takes a bite and is immediately struck by the divine flavor, her eyes widening in surprise. The combination of the perfect sugar and Klaus's innovation has created something truly extraordinary. She is offered a taste of the new confections, her eyes widening at the sheer variety of treats she has never encountered before. Despite the tempting display, she politely tries to decline, not wanting to impose on the group's hard work. The young noble disciple stands nearby with a plate of his own, his expression clouded by a sudden, heavy realization as he watches the others celebrate. He considers the implications of their success, fearing that such extraordinary sweets might attract unwanted attention or even danger if their existence becomes widely known among the competitive nobility. Meanwhile, far from the quiet workshop, a carriage pulls up to the Grand Marquisate residence in the royal capital, where the head chef stands ready to welcome his mistress home after a long journey. The lady of the domain, Margaret, steps out with an air of weary elegance, confessing to the chef that his culinary skills were the only thing she truly looked forward to during her travels. She laments the upcoming social gatherings, explaining how the capital's elite often look down on those from the frontier, using their latest fashions and art to assert a sense of superiority over her. To soothe her spirits, the chef presents a delicate, flower-topped cake. She finds it visually stunning and, upon taking the first bite, is immediately struck by its exceptional flavor. The taste is so profound that it leaves her breathless, prompting the chef to reveal that this masterpiece was created in collaboration with a young alchemist, Meru. Reinvigorated by the exquisite treat, the noblewoman lets out a triumphant laugh, her competitive spirit ignited as she plans to use these sweets to finally outshine the ladies at tomorrow's tea party. Back at the workshop the following morning, a groggy Meru struggles to wake up, while her assistant mentions being kept awake by a strange, echoing laughter that haunted the halls throughout the night. She is hunched over a desk in the dimly lit library, her eyes scanning a complex blueprint with intense focus. Lyle and Alma lean in, captivated by her work, as she expresses a fervent desire to finalize these plans and deliver them to the blacksmith's forge as soon as possible. Her mind races with the realization that as an alchemist possessing memories of a past life, she is the sole gatekeeper of this advanced scientific knowledge. She understands that any future progress in this field will inevitably be traced back to her, placing a heavy burden of legacy upon her young shoulders. She observes Lyle as he examines the papers with a mix of awe and confusion, questioning if this is truly a new invention. She contemplates the profound impact of introducing a completely new lineage of knowledge to this world, one that exists entirely outside the current magical paradigm. Her expression brightens with a sudden flash of inspiration as she recalls a previous conversation about horseless carriages. She envisions a revolutionary vehicle powered by the energy of magic stones, though a small part of her worries that such an overpowered concept might once again tilt the balance of the world. She shares a moment of exuberant joy with Lyle over the incredible potential found within the library's ancient records. Nearby, Eddie watches their unbridled enthusiasm with a weary, skeptical gaze, clearly exhausted by what he perceives as their reckless and carefree attitude towards such dangerous ideas. She pauses to reflect on the ethical weight of her discovery, resting a finger against her chin in deep thought. She wonders if the introduction of a steam engine represents too drastic a technological leap for the current era, even if she suspects that scientific progress would eventually lead someone else to the same conclusion. She casts aside her hesitations and slams her hands onto the table with a resounding thud, presenting her finished work to a startled Ted. The blacksmith is left speechless, staring at the mountain of intricate diagrams and wondering what sort of mechanical madness the young girl has unleashed upon him. Her detailed schematic illustrates a groundbreaking system where fire and ice magic stones are used to manipulate water through cycles of evaporation and condensation. This process creates the necessary pressure to drive a piston, which is then converted into rotational energy by a crankshaft and a heavy flywheel. She elaborates on the machine's versatility, explaining that its utility extends far beyond mere transportation. She describes how it could be used to pump water from deep wells or replace traditional water wheels for grinding grain, providing a consistent and powerful energy source for countless industries. She concludes her explanation with a triumphant smile, justifying her shift from alchemy to engineering as a means of self-preservation. She realizes that by training apprentices and automating labor, she can avoid working herself to death, even as Ted remains baffled by how his little apothecary friend became a master of machines. She explained her simple yet ambitious goal: to create tools that would streamline her work while she was still young, ensuring a peaceful, leisurely life in her later years. Eddie listened, struck by how fundamentally different her approach was from anything he had ever encountered. She scrutinized the designs with a critical eye, privately worrying that the amateurish structure might lack durability. To compensate, she planned to bolster the machine's integrity using hardness-enhancing magic stones, a shortcut she considered a necessary cheat. While Ted found the prospect exhilarating, she inquired if Ted had any small molds available, explaining her plan to manufacture copper wires for the motor. Ted cautioned her that achieving the necessary airtightness and friction levels through manual craftsmanship alone would be a daunting challenge. She activated her alchemical powers, drawing a dark, homogenized stream of iron from the container as Ted watched in stunned silence. She then presented a flawlessly formed metal cylinder, explaining that alchemy could replicate any mold with effortless precision. She watched as he marveled at the piece, noting the complete absence of air bubbles or impurities, a level of structural perfection that was normally impossible to achieve at room temperature. She saw him reinvigorated by the demonstration as he eagerly accepted his role in the project, relieved that his skills were still vital to the process. She finalized the plans with Ted, unaware that Eddie was watching from the sidelines, his mind clouded by memories of a previous disaster involving a Rygene sword that had left a wasteland in its wake. He eventually spoke up, calling out to her with a hesitant tone that betrayed his internal conflict, though she turned toward him with an innocent and curious expression. He watched as the blacksmith remained undeterred, giving a confident thumbs up as he asked if she had prepared countermeasures for any potential risks. He senses the shift in the air as the young noble's eyes narrow with intense suspicion. A bead of sweat rolls down Eddie's temple, his mind consumed by a growing sense of dread that this path will lead to nothing but disaster. Blaze stands ready with a massive, ornate shield, his expression serious as he prepares for the experiment. Beside him, Ted explains the mechanics of the steam engine test, noting the pressure involved. Meru watches with trepidation, her eyes wide as she wonders if the contraption might actually explode despite the precautions taken. He remains at his post while the others retreat to a safe distance. The blacksmith shouts encouragement, boasting that the warrior has hit the jackpot with such a shield. From their vantage point, the machine looks small against the vast horizon, a lone figure standing guard against the unknown forces about to be unleashed. The young man grunts with effort, pulling a lever that strains against his strength. Suddenly, the silence is broken by the mechanical whir of gears as the machine coughs into life, its internal components beginning to move with a powerful, industrial energy. This successful start brings a cheer from the onlookers as the giant wheel spins faster and faster. Ted declares it a triumph, his face lit with excitement. Meru, however, remains cautious, noting the intense, chaotic noise emanating from behind the protective shield and asking if everything is truly stable. The blacksmith wipes his brow, admitting his relief that the device didn't erupt in a violent blast. He acknowledges the difficulty of the build, while the young girl stands nearby, still feeling the lingering heat and the vibration of the engine in her bones. Blaze approaches them, his task complete, as they begin to discuss the next steps. They eventually settle onto the soft grass of the hillside, taking a well-deserved moment to rest. Ted decides to let the engine run for a while longer to test its durability. The tension of the test begins to fade, replaced by the calm of the open field. She looks up, startled, as a familiar voice calls out her name from nearby. The peaceful moment is interrupted by the sudden realization that they are no longer alone in the outskirts. The newcomers, Lyle and Alma, arrive panting and exhausted, having run all the way from the capital. They explain that the thunderous noise from the experiment echoed throughout the city, leading them straight to the source. Blaze greets them, though he seems slightly amused by the fact that he was essentially used as a long-distance runner to keep up with the commotion. They gather around to inspect the machine, marveling at the lack of the thick, black smoke usually associated with such powerful engines. Meru explains the significance of this achievement, noting that while traditional fuel sources are messy, this new design is remarkably clean and eco-friendly, a true advancement in their craft. She reflected on the stark contrast between her current world and her previous life, where the struggle for clean fuel was a constant burden. Here, the absence of harmful substances felt almost like an unfair advantage. As she pondered this, the knight adjusted his gloves, noting that the roar of their successful experiment had likely echoed all the way to the city. He continued his assessment, pointing out that while the machine was impressive, its current size was unnecessary for simple passenger transport and lacked basic comfort. He turned to the blacksmith, questioning if the design could be streamlined into something more compact. The young girl chimed in with enthusiasm, highlighting the sheer efficiency of their creation. While a standard carriage plods along at a mere 6 kilometers per hour, this engine promised speeds 10 times greater. This revelation caused the warrior to fall into a grim silence, his brow furrowed in deep thought as the others watched him with growing concern. The blacksmith mused on how their recent innovations, from magical storage to new delicacies, were already shredding the fabric of common sense. Meanwhile, the knight's mind raced with the strategic implications, realizing that a vehicle faster than a horse would completely upend traditional military doctrine. Seeing the weight of these thoughts, the craftsman offered a simple, grounding perspective, suggesting that if the goal was progress, then the challenges were merely obstacles to be overcome. She lightened the heavy atmosphere with a playful gesture, reminding them with a bright smile that she was still only 12 years old and had plenty of time for such grand concerns. The knight could only sigh in exasperation, urging her to at least maintain a sense of responsibility toward her own station. Sometime later, within the quiet confines of the research building, she focused her efforts on a different kind of craft, meticulously adjusting temperatures and utilizing double magic water generation for medicinal extraction. Having completed her work, she presented the fruits of her labor to her companions, highly effective potions designed to detoxify the body and heal severe illnesses. She ponders the efficiency of simultaneous synthesis, suggesting that crafting 2 different potions at once would significantly speed up her workflow in the research building. This drive for efficiency stems from her desire for a slow life, as she explains to Barbara that finishing her work quickly grants her more precious leisure time. Barbara, however, remains skeptical, noting that performing different tasks with each hand is a feat few can master. Turning her attention back to the laboratory supplies, she realizes that the complexity of a potion is often dictated by the rarity of its ingredients rather than a simple classification of skill level. Her thoughts then drift to the creation of holy water, a potent tool against the undead and curses that requires no physical materials but demands an immense amount of spiritual effort to manifest. While she considers these alchemical pursuits her primary duty, she takes a moment to ask Blaze about any recent zombie sightings, a question that catches the warrior off guard. With the day's official tasks concluded, she enthusiastically announces the start of hobby time, much to the confusion of her companions who fail to see how complex engineering projects fit into her vision of a relaxed lifestyle. She then shifts the conversation with Barbara toward their next major undertaking, designing the actual frame of the horseless carriage to house the completed steam engine. The young alchemist warns that simply attaching the powerful engine to a standard carriage would result in a 60-kilometer-per-hour coffin that lacks the ability to safely turn or come to a halt. Within her mind, a complex schematic begins to take shape, detailing the necessity of a transmission system, a steering wheel, robust brakes, and advanced vibration control to make the vehicle viable. She finally puts pen to paper, beginning the arduous process of drafting blueprints and planning for miniature prototypes, acknowledging that they are entering uncharted territory where traditional knowledge offers no guidance. She enthusiastically outlines her next technical hurdles, explaining how she can finally power an electric mixer using alchemy-made batteries and a steam-driven turbine. Her mind is already racing toward the next project, eager to move past these foundational steps and see her inventions come to life. She beams with pride as her disciples listen, noting how much the world has changed now that even soap is readily available at the market. She encourages them to find their own hobbies outside of their primary duties, insisting that this balanced lifestyle is the true four-leaf way of living. They decide to take a break from their studies when Lyle suggests going for a run to clear his head. She and Alma agree to join him, though they insist on a quick change of clothes before heading out into the fresh air. He quickly finds himself struggling to keep pace, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he realizes his physical stamina lags behind Alma's. She asks with a playful tilt of her head if he's actually trying to get into shape or just running for the sake of it. The Count of Marquis sits at his desk, his expression grave as he discusses the rigors of the upcoming graduation exam. He explains that a mage's worth is proven by retrieving spirit grass from a dragon's nest, a task that demands both magical prowess and the physical ability to defend oneself. She lets the secret slip, mentioning how hard Lyle has been working on his self-defense training lately. He reacts with a flustered shout of protest, while Meru simply nods, acknowledging the necessity of his efforts given the dangers ahead. They continue their walk through the cobblestone streets, and she asks if he had intended for his extra training to remain a secret. He stammers, admitting that it wasn't exactly a secret, just something he wasn't ready to share with everyone yet. He looks away, confessing that he simply wanted to wait until he had some tangible progress to show before making it known. She watches him, understanding the quiet pressure he feels to prove himself worthy of his lineage. She laughs, teasing him about his desire to look cool and impressive when he finally reveals his new skills. While Lyle continues to deny it, Meru finds herself inspired, realizing she should probably find a new personal goal to strive for as well. They are suddenly pulled from their light-hearted banter as a squad of heavily armed soldiers marches past them in perfect unison. The sight of the military presence in the city brings a sudden, sharp chill to the afternoon air. She watches the soldiers pass by, her disciples reacting with a mix of admiration and concern as the atmosphere in the street suddenly shifts. While Lyle finds the display of weaponry impressive, Alma senses an underlying tension in the air, wondering if something significant has occurred to warrant such a presence. Returning to the research building, she is interrupted by Barbara, whose hesitant entrance and worried expression signal that something is wrong. The administrator's voice trembles as she tries to alert her mistress to an urgent and troubling development. Suddenly, the doors are thrown open as armed men storm the room, their leader loudly declaring that she is under arrest. The proclamation leaves her and her companions in a state of utter disbelief, the sudden intrusion shattering the peace of a laboratory. Stepping forward to defend her, the Sword Saint demands to know by whose authority they act, reminding them that the facility is under royal jurisdiction. He is met with a cold, bureaucratic response as the officer produces a formal document, asserting that their orders come from a power that transcends local law. As she stares in wide-eyed terror, the officer coldly asserts that they have the necessary permission to take her into custody. The weight of the situation begins to sink in, her mind racing to understand how things could have escalated so quickly. The true gravity of the situation is revealed when he announces that the church has ordered her to stand trial for heresy. This shocking accusation leaves her trembling as the shadow of the grand cathedral looms over the city, signaling a conflict that threatens her very existence. Meru stands before the imposing royal capital Grand Cathedral, her mind racing with confusion over the mention of a heresy trial. She reflects on the various reasons she has been summoned before: tax evasion, protection, but this new accusation feels far more ominous. As she walks through the grand halls, she notes how much the church has grown over the last millennium. In her past life, such places were merely small chapels, but now they stand as monuments of immense power. Entering the main chamber, she considers the dire state of medicine in a world where alchemy is suppressed. Without it, healing is a primitive affair, leaving the sick with little choice but to offer desperate prayers to the gods. The heavy doors close behind her as the proceedings begin. A high-ranking official, his face etched with stern authority, formally commences the heresy trial, reminding everyone present that they stand in the sight of the divine. She glances toward the balcony, searching for a friendly face among the crowd of observers. While she spots familiar allies like Blaze and Barbara, she can't help but feel isolated, wondering if anyone truly stands on her side. Observing her from above, the warrior senses something is amiss, noting the unusual number of high-ranking nobles gathered for what should be a simple inquiry. The official's voice cuts through the tension, demanding she confirm her identity as Marushial Fourleaf. In response, another official produces a shimmering, translucent orb. It pulses with a faint, rhythmic light, drawing the eyes of everyone in the silent room. This device, they explain, will serve as a lie detector during the questioning. She finds the inclusion of such a tool convenient, though the weight of the situation continues to press down on her. The lead official leans forward, his mouth set in a grim line as he prepares to speak. The air grows heavy with anticipation as he begins to lay out the formal charges. He lists a series of preposterous crimes, accusing her of forging a demon sword that raised a hill, creating iron beasts, and even corrupting noble women with devilishly sweet desserts. She can only stare in disbelief, her mind reeling at the sheer absurdity of the allegations. She stands firm before the tribunal, her voice steady despite the confusion swirling around the accusations. While she acknowledges the creation of a certain blade, the rest of the charges seem like nonsense to her, and she delivers a sharp, singular denial to the question of her heresy. In response to her defiance, the presiding official gestures toward a glowing crystal orb, which now displays a harsh, luminous X. He declares the device's verdict as absolute proof of her guilt, prompting her to cry out in frustration at the unfairness of a system that branded her a liar for a single admission. Feeling the weight of the judgment, the young alchemist scans the room for her missing ally, Blaze, silently pleading for him to intervene. Meanwhile, the judge coldly announces that the verdict is final and that no further objections from the accused will be entertained. Just as hope seems to fade, a sudden, brilliant light erupts from the spectator's balcony, drawing every eye in the cathedral upward. Still trapped in her own worry, she remains oblivious to the source of the light, her mind racing with irritation at the Sword Saint's ill-timed disappearance. She reflects bitterly on how he always seemed to be lurking nearby until the moment his presence was truly required, leaving her to face this trial alone. However, the silence is shattered not by the warrior, but by Barbara, who rises with a commanding shout of objection. She identifies herself as the supervisor of the research wing and boldly asserts that her own records of the girl's activities contradict the church's baseless claims. The judge remains unmoved, narrowing his eyes as he challenges the administrator to prove that no crimes were committed during the moments the girl was out of her sight. The logic is a trap, and it leaves the woman momentarily speechless. Despite the setback, a new idea takes hold of the administrator, as she turns back to the defendant with a desperate question. She recalls ancient records of alchemists producing holy water and asks if such a feat is possible now. Though the mention of holy water brings strange thoughts of the undead to her mind, the young girl confirms that she can indeed produce the substance. This revelation offers a potential lifeline, as the ability to create something sacred would surely refute the charge of heresy. She suddenly has a moment of clarity, realizing that Barbara's suggestion is the perfect solution. If she can demonstrate her faith by creating holy water, the heresy charges will have to be dropped, proving once and for all that she has not turned her back on the gods. In response to her claim, the presiding official recoils in disbelief, his face contorted with skepticism. He argues that such a feat hasn't been accomplished in centuries and that her ignorance of this fact only proves she is a heretic of the highest order. Undeterred, the young girl looks at the high-ranking man before her and questions how they, who claim such authority, are unable to produce the very substance they hold sacred. The judge roars back, insisting that the church is the sole purveyor of divine goods. She counters sharply, asking what purpose the institution serves if a person of simple faith like herself can achieve what they cannot. Taking a steadying breath, she drinks from a small container, preparing herself for the task ahead. She realizes that the church's own failure to produce holy water has inadvertently given her the perfect opportunity to prove her worth. She then settles into a kneeling position, placing a glass on the floor before her. With a focused expression, she begins an invocation to Philiastin, the creator god, while the officials watch with growing unease. Closing her eyes in deep concentration, she humbly beseeches the divine for a single, pure drop. A faint, ethereal glow begins to emanate from the circle where she sits, signaling the start of something miraculous. After the intense effort, she collapses backward, gasping for air. Into the glass, a single, shimmering drop of liquid falls, a special grade of holy water, more potent than anything seen in generations, effective against the darkest of curses. Catching her breath, she holds the vessel out toward the stunned judges. She pointedly asks if they would still dare to label her a heretic now that she has succeeded where they have failed. The officials are left speechless, their faces pale with shock. One of them realizes with a start that she spoke the secret name of the deity, a name known only to the highest ranks, leading him to wonder if the legends of the Holy Maiden are true. He recoiled, his face contorted in a mix of shock and indignation as the other officials questioned the validity of the appraisal. The suggestion that he had somehow tampered with the holy vessel was beyond insulting. Yet the results before him were impossible to ignore. While he struggled to maintain his composure, Meru stood her ground, her voice steady as she questioned the relentless drive to brand her a heretic despite the evidence. Frustrated and determined to find the truth, the high priest snatched the appraisal orb, declaring he would settle the matter himself. He stared into the depths of the crystal, his eyes widening and sweat beading on his brow as a strange light began to emanate from within. This was unprecedented. In all his years of service, the divine vessel had never reacted with such overwhelming intensity. As the light coalesced into legible script, the message revealed was not a condemnation, but a divine blessing from the creator god Philiastin himself. It was a peculiar decree, simply stating that this young girl was never to be worked to the point of exhaustion, a revelation that left everyone in the room stunned. She, however, was far from impressed, looking at the orb with a mix of disappointment and annoyance as she grumbled about the lack of a more practical cheat ability. Meanwhile, the officials were gripped by a sudden, icy terror, realizing they had come perilously close to invoking divine wrath by persecuting one so clearly favored. The tension in the room shifted instantly from accusation to frantic finger-pointing as the priests began to turn on one another. They realized the gravity of their error, each trying to distance themselves from the decision to bring the girl to trial in the first place. Their hushed, urgent whispers filled the hall as they acknowledged the truth. She was never the problem. The realization dawned on them that the true source of the chaos was the one who had brought these baseless charges to their doorstep, not the girl standing before them. Moments later, the heavy doors of the cathedral creaked open as she finally stepped out into the fresh air, letting out a long, weary sigh. The ordeal had been a draining spectacle of incompetence, and she was more than ready to put the entire mess behind her. Barbara was waiting for her. A hand pressed her chest in a gesture of profound relief now that the girl's innocence had been officially recognized. Though the situation had been a chaotic disaster, the administrator was simply glad that the threat of the Inquisition had finally passed. As they walked away from the church, they began to unravel the absurd rumors that had fueled the trial, from misunderstood magical tools to simple tea party snacks. It became clear that every crime, was merely a mundane event twisted into a legend by those who didn't understand the girl's unique talents. She immediately demands to know where he has been, her voice sharp with frustration. He calmly replies that he was doing some digging around while the trial unfolded. She listens as he explains that the root of the trouble was a noblewoman's envy. She was used to being the trendsetter of the capital and couldn't stand being outshone by Meru's sweets. The sheer popularity of the treats had driven her to a state of desperate frustration. He recounts how the Count explained that high-ranking nobles had bribed a cardinal to orchestrate a fake inquisition. Their goal was to isolate the Marquis's house and seize both the young girl and her valuable recipes for themselves. His words leave her reeling with indignation, as she shouts about how unfair and corrupt the entire situation was. He can only agree, admitting he had a bad feeling from the start and that the church's inability to produce holy water while focusing on fancy buildings is a disgrace. She and her companions walk through the city, but Barbara's displeasure is evident. She is deeply upset that he chose to leave Meru's side during such a critical trial. He senses her gaze and asks what she means by her silence. She watches as he defends his actions, explaining that the presence of so many high-ranking nobles was highly suspicious, prompting him to investigate. He points out that, as a commoner in that setting, there was little he could have done by simply staying in the courtroom. He notices her silence as she processes his reasoning with her eyes cast downward. He acknowledges that while he was away, she managed to resolve the situation on her own, though the weight of the conspiracy still lingers. She suddenly snaps, grabbing his cloak and demanding a proper apology for his disappearance. He is caught off guard by her sudden outburst and the intensity of her glare as she looms over him with a menacing aura. Her outburst leaves him looking away in regret, realizing that leaving her alone while acting as her guard was indeed a mistake. The silence between them grows heavy with the unspoken tension of the day's events. He finally addresses Meru directly, calling her name to explain that as a knight, he lacked the standing to speak in court. He decided that uncovering the true cause of the conspiracy was a more vital use of his time than standing by helplessly in the courtroom. He looks away, a bead of sweat rolling down his cheek as he struggles to find the right words. He admits that perhaps he had placed too much faith in her ability to handle such a dangerous situation on her own, realizing now that his overconfidence was a mistake. Continuing his humble admission, the swordsman acknowledges that his absence was a failure of his duty as a protector. As the young girl begins to walk away in silence, he bows his head slightly and offers a sincere apology for his lapse in judgment, stating that his behavior was unacceptable for someone tasked with her safety. In the bustling streets, commoners bow low, their voices filled with reverence as they hail the arrival of the one they call the saintess. They feel blessed simply to be in her presence, treating her appearance as a divine event. She offers a hesitant wave in return, still adjusting to the public adoration that has followed her in the 2 months since the heresy trial concluded. The transition from accused to icon has been jarring, leaving her feeling more awkward than honored. Later, while seated at a quiet table, she confides in her companion that this unwanted worship brings her little joy, though he reminds her that such is the burden of one carrying a divine blessing. Even without official recognition, the rumors of her status have spread far and wide, complicating their daily lives. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of a formal notice from the Chancellor, a reminder of the strict house arrest that had confined her until very recently. The weight of political scrutiny remains heavy, as she was forbidden from even leaving her home without explicit permission. Despite the restrictions, she admits that the period of isolation allowed her to make significant strides in both her professional duties and personal interests. The forced solitude provided a rare opportunity for uninterrupted focus, leading to what she describes as terrifying progress. With her newfound freedom, a sudden spark of inspiration strikes her, and she declares her intent to finally venture beyond the familiar walls of her confinement. The frustration of being cooped up for months has fueled a desperate need for a change of scenery. She turns to the stoic warrior with a bright smile, suggesting a journey to the remote countryside where the whispers of her supposed divinity have yet to take root. Her eyes sparkle with the hope of finding a place where she can simply be herself again. He immediately dismisses the idea, explaining that her safety is now a matter of national security and that such a trip is out of the question. The realization that she has become a vital asset to the kingdom's defense is a bitter pill for her to swallow. The reality of her situation is stark. The mere presence of someone blessed by the Creator God acts as a supernatural deterrent, as any aggressor would fear the literal wrath of heaven falling upon their borders. No nation would dare risk the divine punishment that would follow an invasion. This divine shield has already shifted the geopolitical landscape, allowing the royal army to withdraw from the borders of the Britannia Empire as her very existence secures a fragile ceasefire. The map of the region has been redrawn not by swords, but by the perceived protection of a single girl. Meru and Blaze share a drink, enjoying a rare moment of tranquility. She beams, remarking that peace is truly a wonderful thing. They discuss the possibility of a trip, and he agrees to at least check with the authorities, though he warns her not to get her hopes up. He listens as she immediately begins brainstorming, wondering if a day trip to the Marquis territory might be permitted for testing or exploration. She is quickly corrected as he reminds her that the journey to the capital alone took 2 full days, making a day trip impossible. He watches as she shifts the conversation to the progress she's made on her personal projects over the last 2 months. They soon arrive at the workshop of the local blacksmith, who greets the young girl with a respectful nod, acknowledging her status as the saintess. He proudly presents his latest achievement, a successfully miniaturized steam engine, laughing heartily at their success. He then asks what she has brought this time, prompting her to declare that she hasn't been idle during her confinement. She triumphantly unveils a miniature horseless carriage, a complex machine designed to revolutionize travel. The swordsman stares at the contraption with a skeptical expression, noting that for something labeled a miniature, the vehicle is surprisingly large. He stands by as the young alchemist explains the intricate workings of her latest creation. She admits that while it began as a mere toy-sized prototype, the necessity of safety features caused the design to swell in complexity and scale. The blacksmith listens, though the girl's references to strange, distant concepts leave them both somewhat bewildered. Looking at the machine, the knight feels a sudden weight of responsibility, wondering if his role has shifted from protector to a mere test subject for these mechanical marvels. Even a man of his discipline has his limits when faced with such unpredictable ingenuity. The blacksmith interrupts his thoughts, pointing out that the frame is finally large enough for a rider and perfectly accommodates the miniature steam engine they developed. Despite the technical success, the warrior remains silent, his gaze fixed on the contraption with a mixture of duty and dread. With the operation explained and the final components in place, the master smith expresses confidence that the vehicle is ready for its maiden voyage. The young girl prepares the last piece, her excitement mounting as the moment of truth approaches. He lets out a resigned sigh, knowing that if he refuses to take the helm, someone less capable might be put at risk. As he climbs into the seat, she offers frantic last-minute advice, urging him to maintain a safe speed and be prepared to abandon ship if things go south. He can only offer a silent prayer that the engine holds together. Suddenly, the engine roars to life with a violent shudder, propelling him forward at a startling velocity. From the sidelines, his companions watch in awe, their cheers nearly drowned out by the mechanical thunder of the speeding carriage. As the wind whips past his face, the knight finds himself surprised by the sensation, realizing that the speed provides a peculiar sense of freedom he hadn't anticipated. However, the thrill quickly turns to concern for those watching as he pushes the machine even harder, tearing across the open ground. The blacksmith stares in disbelief, questioning the sanity of the man behind the wheel as the vehicle continues to gain momentum, far exceeding what any of them expected. Eventually, the mechanical beast slows to a halt, bringing him back to the starting point amidst a cloud of steam and dust. The smith breathes a sigh of relief, admitting he was genuinely worried the knight wouldn't return in one piece. Stepping down from the carriage with a newfound gleam in his eye, the warrior turns to the young inventor and asks if he might keep the machine for himself. His request leaves her utterly speechless, her mouth agape at the sudden change in his demeanor. He stood there, breathless, his usual stoic mask shattered by the sheer thrill of the ride. While he stammered about the prototype's power, Ted stepped in with a grin, suggesting that once he dissected the inner workings, he could forge a duplicate at his own workshop. Meru, caught between their enthusiasm and the technical reality, could only watch as the two men began planning the future of transportation. Seeing the legendary knight so uncharacteristically animated, the blacksmith couldn't help but chuckle, noting how completely Blaze had lost his composure. The knight, however, was already looking ahead, lamenting that he couldn't immediately showcase this marvel to his disciples, Lyle and Alma, though he knew the time wasn't yet right. Even with his composure regained, he had to concede that the carriage was a monumental achievement, a sentiment echoed by the wide-eyed wonder of the young disciples standing nearby. The excitement proved infectious as Alma eagerly reached for the vehicle, her eyes sparkling with a desire to experience the speed for herself. Meru quickly intervened, warning the girl to be careful with her hands around the complex machinery as the group's focus shifted to the practicalities of the new invention. As they watched the carriage, Meru's thoughts turned to the progress of the two students, noting that while Alma had been diligently honing her swordsmanship under Blaze's tutelage, Lyle seemed to be stuck in a cycle of simple weightlifting, still undecided on his own combat style. Feeling the weight of his indecision, the boy finally admitted that perhaps it was time to reveal what he had been working on in secret. Alma encouraged him, acknowledging that the sheer volume of martial arts stored within the archives was enough to overwhelm anyone, but she believed in his potential to find his own path. With a sharp exhale, he stepped forward, focusing his energy into a single, decisive strike against a sturdy tree trunk. The impact was explosive, a burst of raw power that left the observer stunned. Blaze watched in silent surprise, realizing the boy wasn't using a blade at all, but rather the disciplined strikes of Kenpu. Meru, observing the flow of energy, explained that he was channeling chi directly from the ley lines to amplify the force of his blow. Despite the impressive display, the young man admitted that fighting without the reach of a weapon made the path significantly more difficult. Meru offered a reassuring smile, reminding him that finding a style that truly resonated with his spirit was far more important than the inherent difficulty of the discipline. To his surprise, she revealed that she too had relied on Kenpu during her own final examinations, though she eventually transitioned to using a spear and her signature sickle. She explained that with her smaller stature, she needed the extra reach that a weapon provided, leaving the boy to contemplate how he might adapt his own burgeoning skills. She strikes a confident pose, her eyes narrowing with a playful smirk as she demonstrates the refined form of her martial arts. This technique was the same one she had unleashed during a dragon hunt, a strike so powerful it was difficult to restrain even for her. Blaze watches the demonstration with a grim, focused expression, acknowledging the sheer force behind her movements. The conversation shifts to the practicalities of hunting, as she explains that while the heart is the most delicious part of a dragon, a strike from within tends to ruin the meat. The sword saint remains skeptical, questioning the wisdom of holding back against such a lethal predator just for the sake of a meal. Reflecting on Lao's progress, she realizes that his reliance on Kenpu presents a significant culinary problem. They won't be able to enjoy dragon heart steak if he continues to crush his targets. She sighs, noting that his examination process is likely to be a lengthy affair. Suddenly, a bright idea strikes her, and she enthusiastically proposes assigning a nightly bodyguard to Lyle. Alma voices her concern, fearing that without proper guidance, the young man will simply devolve into a mindless fitness enthusiast. Blaze ponders the difficulty of finding someone capable of taking down a dragon, noting that for true growth, one also needs the vitality that comes from having a partner. She can only blink in confusion at his sudden emphasis on the importance of youth. She suggests that he should find someone of his own caliber, pointing out that with the legendary Raijin sword at his disposal, such feats must surely come easily to him. Taking her suggestion to heart, the sword saint adopts a more formal tone, admitting that while he has many reservations, he is serious enough about this test to make an official request. 3 days pass in the blink of an eye, the quiet of the estate masking the preparations being made behind its high stone walls. As they walk through the halls, Blaze informs her that the bodyguard has already been sent out. He mutters under his breath, clearly finding the speed and nature of the arrangement hard to believe. He reflects on the maturity required to handle the inevitable headaches of assigning a guard to an apprentice, even if it's for an alchemist. He had anticipated schemes and complications, yet he didn't stop the process, recognizing the necessity of the arrangement. Barbara interrupts his thoughts with a formal report, relaying a message from the Marquis. She explains that the selection for the guard was both immediate and beyond any dispute, though the message offered no further details regarding the individual's identity. Hearing this, he realizes the chosen ones have already arrived. Barbara's tone shifts slightly, prompting a curious glance from him as they prepare to meet the newcomers who have caused such a stir with their sudden appearance. She leads them toward the courtyard, her expression grave as she urges them to exercise extreme caution. The weight of her warning hangs in the air as they approach the open space where the mysterious guards await. As they walk, he ponders what kind of selection could possibly be so indisputable that no one would dare complain. Beside him, Meru looks equally apprehensive, her mind racing with possibilities about the caliber of warrior they are about to encounter. The young girl's mind races with images of a hulking, unreasonable berserker, the kind of brute strength Lyle might have associated with in his youth. She fears a warrior who listens to nothing but the call of battle and possesses no sense of reason. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing pressure stops her in her tracks. Her eyes widen in shock as a formidable aura washes over her, far more refined and intense than the brute she had imagined moments before. Emerging from the light, a knight in gleaming silver armor approaches with a steady, confident stride. He and the girl can only stare in disbelief, realizing the identity of the indisputable choice is someone far more significant than they expected. The warrior stands before them, her long hair catching the wind and a scar marking her face as a veteran of countless battles. Her presence is absolute, radiating the unmistakable power and calm of a true master of the blade. Meru feels an oppressive weight in the air, her instincts screaming in alarm as she faces the formidable woman. The intensity of the gaze fixed upon her is unlike anything she has encountered before. Sensing the mounting pressure, Lyle steps forward to bridge the gap, awkwardly introducing the young girl as his esteemed master. The knight remains silent, her sharp eyes never leaving the child. She finally breaks the silence, bowing with a practiced grace and introducing herself as Elizabeth, Lyle's newly appointed bodyguard. She offers a formal apology for her earlier coldness, explaining that such caution was necessary for their first encounter. In response, the young alchemist beams with a bright, disarming smile, waving off the apology and praising the knight's apparent reliability. She plays the part of the innocent child perfectly, masking the tension she felt moments ago. The knight acknowledges the girl's kindness before turning back to her charge, requesting that Lyle continue his tour of the research facility while she returns to her post. Lyle, still slightly rattled, quickly agrees to the arrangement. As she strides away, the girl offers a cheerful wave, though the knight casts one final, calculating look over her shoulder. Walking through the quiet halls, he finds himself lost in thought comparing the rumors of the legendary alchemist with a petite girl he just left behind. The knight breaks his reverie, admitting that she was genuinely struck by the girl's maturity, noting that it seemed to far exceed her youthful appearance. He can only agree, confessing that the girl often seems more composed than he is. She continues her silent assessment, recalling her father's warnings about a reckless and difficult girl. If those reports had been true, she had fully intended to enforce strict discipline. She concludes that the girl was not only completely unfazed by her deliberate display of killing intent, but even had the presence of mind to respond with genuine consideration. She remains calm as the knight observes her, leading the warrior woman to realize her father had a very good reason to take an interest in such a peculiar child. The knight then turns away, stating she will return to her duties without further delay or idle conversation. Watching her go, the young girl notes how incredibly stiff and serious the woman seems to be. Beside her, the seasoned warrior exhales a long breath of relief, his clothes damp with the sweat of nervous tension. While the girl acknowledges the intensity of the bloodlust they just felt, he suggests that the pressure of the encounter was far more complex than simple intimidation. He explains that her strength is undeniable, having earned the rank of general through merit alone rather than noble birth. This news leaves the girl stunned, prompting her companion to ask if she was truly unaware of who she was dealing with. The reality of the situation is staggering. The woman is Elizabeth Haenix von Burgengreen, the third princess of this very nation. She can hardly believe her ears, her face contorted in a look of pure disbelief as the warrior confirms the knight's royal status. Still reeling, she questions why a princess would be here, to which he responds by mentioning the withdrawal of the northern border troops. He points out that she was the commander of the Burgengreen region, a place the Northern Empire feared to attack due to a legendary divine blessing. The girl then recalls hearing something about that specific protection. She tries to wrap her head around the logic of the situation, concluding that the princess's sudden lack of duties at the border is a direct result of the world becoming more peaceful thanks to her own efforts. It seems that with no threats to repel, a high-ranking general has found herself with far too much free time. Her instincts are screaming in protest at the idea of a rigid former general being a princess, while the young man beside her agrees that assigning such a high-ranking figure as the bodyguard is an extreme measure. He still can't quite grasp the reasoning behind placing a royal in such a subservient role, even if it is for protection. He worries about the complications of having royalty involved in dangerous tasks like dragon slaying or even simple graduation exams, fearing the consequences if anything were to happen to her. Meanwhile, she mourns the death of her slow life plan, realizing that her dreams of peaceful days and steak dinners are slipping away. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of the administrator, who approaches with a calm smile and a document in hand. She announces that their planned excursion is indeed possible, much to the surprise of the young girl who is just beginning to lose hope. She presents a written permit from the princess herself, detailing a day trip to Lake Crane within the Duchy of Phyllis. The young man looks on in disbelief, realizing that the wheels are already in motion for a journey he hadn't fully expected to be authorized. She continues to explain the benefits of the trip, noting that it will serve as excellent field work for the apprentices and mentioning the abundance of herb fields near the Lakeside villa. The prospect of gathering rare ingredients and visiting a scenic location begins to lift the young girl's spirits. She then reveals the most shocking detail. The princess will be accompanying them on this outing. It turns out that the royal hasn't visited Lake Crane in a long time, having been occupied with her duties guarding the border for years. The young man clenches his fist in frustration, realizing that any hope for a truly relaxing journey has vanished now that royalty is tagging along. He notes that the Duchy of Phyllis is the home of the princess's mother's family, making the trip even more official and high-stakes than he anticipated. He watches as the administrator's enthusiasm peaks, as she suggests using their demonic sweets to charm the local noble ladies and win over the princess herself. The young girl is quickly swept up in the excitement, cheering at the prospect of their sugary conquest. They eventually settle on the plan, though the young man remains the voice of reason, pointing out that they don't actually have a formal excuse for such a scheme. Nevertheless, he concedes that it's time to reset their expectations and begin the final preparations for the trip. He watches with a growing sense of trepidation as Meru's list of preparations spirals out of control. She enthusiastically suggests commissioning a cooler box and a portable heater from the blacksmith, while also planning to have the head chef prepare specialized summer sweets. To him, it seems she is using the princess's presence as a justification to double her usual demands. As he offers a pragmatic and blunt alternative to her suggestion of a portable toilet, she responds with a silent, judgmental stare. The idea of simply using the woods does not seem to have pleased the young girl, who remains deeply immersed in her logistical brainstorming for the long journey ahead. He can only let out a weary groan as the weight of her ambition sinks in. The sheer complexity of what she intends to present to the princess is enough to make his head spin, leaving him wondering how they will manage to coordinate such an elaborate and equipment-heavy excursion. While he worries, she remains undeterred, moving on to the logistics of transportation by suggesting both a large buggy for the main trip and a smaller one for leisure. Although she secretly delights in using the princess as a perfect excuse to indulge her passion for crafting, she casually mentions her desire to go for a swim in the lake, a suggestion that catches the others completely off guard. Her casual mention of swimming triggers a frantic lecture from the administrator, who insists that such an activity is absolutely forbidden for a young lady of 13. As the woman frets over the impossibility of guarding her in the water, the girl remains baffled, questioning if they mistakenly equate swimming with indecency. Yet, amidst the chaos, a sudden spark of inspiration strikes the swordsman. On the outskirts of the royal capital, the group enjoys a day on the lake. Meru is thrilled by the speed of their vessel, but Barbara shouts a warning as they approach a potential hazard. She lets out a startled cry as the boat jolts violently, sending a massive spray of water over the side. Blaze and Barbara rush to her side, their faces etched with concern as they check to see if she has been injured by the sudden impact. They find her dripping wet, but otherwise unharmed, and she admits that the small steam engine's propulsion was far more powerful than she had anticipated. While it was intended for simple leisure, the sheer force of the screw turning in the water provided more excitement than any of them had bargained for. He watches as she lets out a sudden sneeze, her damp clothes clearly beginning to chill her. Despite the mishap, she remains optimistic, noting that even if swimming is prohibited, this new method of travel allows her to enjoy the lake's beauty to the fullest. She stands there, water dripping from her hair and clothes, a miserable shiver running through her small frame. The initial thrill of the ride has been replaced by the uncomfortable reality of being completely soaked through. They decide it is best to find dry clothes immediately to prevent her from catching a cold, and she agrees, realizing that her current outfit has become quite snug. She reflects on how her health and stature have improved since leaving her difficult life on the farm, a change that Blaze notes with a look of quiet surprise. She is taken aback when Barbara gestures to her height, questioning if she hasn't already grown significantly. The sudden focus on her physical development leaves her feeling a bit flustered and self-conscious. He finds himself on the receiving end of Barbara's ire after he clumsily wonders if the change she mentioned was actually an increase in weight. He had only intended to report back to the Marquis about her improved health, but his lack of tact regarding the young lady's growth earns him a sharp reprimand. They begin to make their way away from the water, with Barbara leading the way and urging them to hurry. She calls back to Blaze, instructing him to secure the boat as they prepare to head into the city for a change of attire. The shopkeeper greets them with a knowing smile, teasingly asking if the young girl had perhaps enjoyed her time at the lake a bit too much. Barbara sighs, admitting they have their hands full, while the merchant quickly offers to find the perfect new outfit for their damp companion. She stands before the shopkeeper, who enthusiastically presents the garment featuring a whimsical lake monster. While the woman insists it is perfect for active children, the young girl politely declines the overly cute design, preferring something more practical. Because the weather has been sweltering lately, the shopkeeper suggests they look for a summer outfit suitable for their trip, perhaps incorporating cooling fans or a specialized cooling liquid to combat the heat. She expresses some hesitation, finding the idea of a fan a bit unappealing, but the merchant clarifies that the goal is heat protection, leading the girl to admit it might actually be a sound plan. Taking the initiative, she requests a custom modification, a small pocket added to some ready-made undergarments. The merchant warns that such bespoke work will be expensive, but the girl dismisses the concern, stating that funds are no obstacle. She is met with a look of pure shock as the manager's eyes widen in sudden recognition upon reading the name on the order, Mary Asfield Fourleaf. The girl, meanwhile, feels a strange sense of nostalgia at the woman's dramatic reaction. Having accepted the task, the merchant explains her plan to sew a tiny magic stone of cooling and wind into the requested pocket, curious about what the girl intends to do with such a specialized modification. She soon emerges in the new attire, delighted by the refreshing sensation and confident that it will help her avoid a sweaty, uncomfortable vacation. Seeing her customer's satisfaction, the merchant becomes even more spirited, eagerly presenting a variety of other summer styles for her to consider trying on. Once the shopping is finally complete, she steps out of the boutique to find the sword saint waiting patiently, ready for them to regroup and head home after their successful errand. As they walk, she mentions the specific details of her new undergarments, leaving her companion momentarily bewildered by the unusual request he had nearly forgotten about. She reaches out, offering a small, shimmering magic stone to the knight, suggesting he tuck it into a pocket to experience its effects. As he accepts the gift, a sudden, refreshing gust of wind swirls around him, prompting an immediate sense of relief from the oppressive heat. She admits that the rising temperatures have been weighing on her spirits and wonders aloud if the stone's size should be further refined for convenience. Looking at his heavy attire, she questions why he persists in wearing such cumbersome layers instead of something more breathable. He explains the grim reality of his profession. Armor must be worn beneath his clothes at all times, a necessity that leaves little room for comfort or style. In response, she proposes a revolutionary idea, infusing everyday garments with blade-resistant enchantments to mimic the protection of chainmail without the bulk. This would allow for both safety and the pursuit of fashion. While he cautions her against overconfidence in such enchantments, she privately muses that such an innovation might very well render traditional armor shops obsolete. She ponders the nature of the threats they might face, but he is quick to temper her expectations, noting that while the fabric might resist a blade, it offers no defense against the devastating power of a master strike or a concentrated magic attack. A few days pass in preparation, and soon the group stands together, ready to embark on their journey. Turning to their companions, she expresses her deep gratitude to the blacksmith and the chef for their tireless efforts in readying the supplies on such short notice. Behind them, a cart sits heavily laden with everything required for the trek ahead. The two men dismiss her thanks with humble gestures, insisting that their contributions were merely part of their duty. However, their professional masks slip as they contemplate the young girl enjoying the meals they prepared, their faces flushing with an intensity that leaves her feeling slightly unsettled by their overwhelming enthusiasm. She stands before a marvel of engineering, a horseless carriage. The driver is cautioned to handle the vehicle with extreme care, especially given the prestige of their passenger and his own reputation for reckless speed. Turning back to her companions, she receives a warm smile from Ted, who admits that her confidence is strangely reassuring. He and Klaus agree that their preparations have reached a perfect conclusion, satisfied with how everything has turned out. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Lyle and the other disciples. The sight of the group causes a collective, nervous gulp from the blacksmith and the chef, the weight of the impending journey finally settling in. As the newcomers approach, Lyle stares at the mechanical beast with utter confusion, questioning what such a thing could be. She quickly steps in, suggesting he simply view it as a carriage without horses to ease his bewilderment. With the group assembled, she turns her attention to the scarred knight, bowing deeply and gesturing toward the vehicle. She politely invites the woman she addresses as Her Highness to take her seat, offering to lead the way. The knight pauses, her gaze fixed on the young girl with an intensity that seems to halt the very air around them. Radiating a palpable aura of intimidation, the warrior firmly requests that she not be treated like royalty. She reminds everyone present that, despite her lineage, she is currently serving as nothing more than a royal guard. Startled by the sudden pressure, she stammers out an apology, her face flushed with embarrassment as Lyle and the others watch the awkward exchange unfold. Despite the rocky start, the horseless carriage soon rumbles to life and begins its trek, leaving the estate behind as it ventures into the open countryside. Inside the cramped cabin, a heavy, suffocating silence falls over the passengers. While the atmosphere is undeniably awkward, she remains undeterred, mentally preparing a secret weapon she believes can melt even the iciest of royal dispositions. The magical buggy roars across the landscape, its speed far exceeding that of a traditional carriage. From the window, Lyle calls out to Maru, desperately hoping she can provide some witty conversation to ease the tension of their rapid journey, though she privately doubts her ability to do so. While they speed along, the atmosphere inside the cramped cabin remains thick with unspoken social boundaries. Alma chides Lyle for his informal address, reminding him that princess is a forbidden term, while Meru sits between them, visibly flustered by the discussion of her status and the expectations of youth. Her flustered state only intensifies when Elizabeth suddenly addresses her by her formal title, Mary Asfieldano. The unexpected recognition from the formidable knight causes her to jump in her seat, stammering out a startled response. Noticing the tension her words caused, the knight observes that their pace has put them well ahead of schedule. She proposes a brief respite, a suggestion that brings a visible wave of relief to both Lyle and Meru. She continues to marvel at the machine, noting that unlike living steeds, this buggy shows no signs of fatigue. The prospect of reaching the lake without a single stop for rest is a revelation to her, though it leaves Meru contemplating the sheer efficiency of her creation. The implications of such technology begin to take shape in her mind, as she envisions a revolutionary transport network connecting major cities. Hearing this, a sense of dread begins to pool in Meru's stomach, fearing the rapid escalation of her invention's impact. As the knight's vision of the future grows, the young inventor attempts to ground the conversation by rattling off the immense logistical hurdles, from the need for dedicated roads and terminals to the severe shortage of skilled blacksmiths and train drivers. She emphasizes that this is merely a prototype, far from ready for widespread deployment. Yet Elizabeth remains focused, questioning if these practical obstacles are truly the only things standing in the way. The knight dismisses these concerns, arguing that manpower and land are easily managed resources as long as the device doesn't rely on rare magic stones, leaving Meru sweating as she hides her true anxiety. Amidst this high-level strategic talk, a more immediate concern strikes her. They have yet to secure the patent for Ted, the blacksmith whose craftsmanship made the buggy possible. She remains silent, her expression clouded with the realization of the forgotten patent, but Elizabeth offers a reassuring word. The knight insists that they will handle the matter on their end, suggesting there is a simpler and more potent solution to the problem than Meru might expect. Deciding to set aside her anxieties for the moment, the group continues their journey as the magical buggy rumbles through the dense forest. They agree that since this is a rare excursion, it is best to enjoy the trip rather than dwell on logistical oversights. The dense treeline eventually gives way to a breathtaking vista of a crystal-clear lake nestled against towering, snow-capped mountains. The sight draws gasps of wonder from the young travelers, who find the scenery well worth the bumpy ride. While the others admire the view, Blaze finds himself struggling with a portable cooking device, much to the amusement of his companions. Alma jests that without the buggy to manage, the renowned warrior is surprisingly inept with basic technology, while also noticing that Elizabeth has wandered off. She then turns her attention to Lyle, who is staring wistfully at the horizon, lost in his own thoughts. Observing the quiet moment between them, she reflects on the importance of youthful companionship and the bonds formed during such travels. Seeking out the missing knight, the young disciple finds her standing guard at the edge of the clearing. When invited to join the group for lunch, the warrior politely declines, citing her duty as a bodyguard, though she eventually accepts a small offering of food. Upon taking a bite, the knight is visibly startled by the intense chill of the meal, her eyes widening in surprise. Her companion simply smiles, suggesting that the explanation for the strange temperature can be found back at the main camp. Returning to the group, the warrior is greeted by the enticing aroma of freshly baked bread and the sight of steam rising from a hearty pot of soup. The contrast between the chilled snacks and the hot meal laid out in the middle of the wilderness leaves her momentarily speechless. Meru steps forward to explain the mystery, gesturing toward a set of compact devices powered by magic stones. She describes how they utilized a specialized cooler box and an instant-range cooker to prepare the feast, inviting the knight to help herself to the spread. The knight is deeply impressed, her respect for the young girl's ingenuity growing as she realizes that these domestic marvels come from the same mind that forged a magic sword. Beside her, the young apothecary can't help but feel a surge of pride at the successful demonstration of her inventions. She takes a bite of the sandwich, her refined palate immediately identifying the perfect balance of soft, fluffy bread and a lightly toasted exterior. She notes how the gentle sweetness of the wheat complements the savory meat inside, concluding that it is far more than just a simple sandwich. Her detailed analysis leaves the young girl beside her wide-eyed with admiration at such a professional food review. As the group enjoys their meal by the lakeside, the young inventor wonders aloud if the secret to such incredible flavor lies within the power of magic stones, though the idea of stones making food delicious seems a bit far-fetched even to her. Curious about the creator of these delicacies, she learns that every dish was prepared by Klaus, the esteemed head chef of the Marquis household. The revelation that one man could produce such a variety of high-quality food alone leaves her deeply impressed. The knight gazes out at the water, contemplating the rarity of such a feast and questioning whether meals of this caliber should truly be confined to the walls of a noble estate, never to be experienced by the wider world. Sensing an opportunity to further impress her guest, the girl reaches for a special container she has been keeping ready. With a flourish, she reveals a bowl of chilled ice cream, proudly announcing it as the head chef's latest masterpiece. A mischievous glint enters her eyes as she watches the knight's reaction, confident that this frozen treat is the ultimate secret weapon that will finally break through the noblewoman's composed exterior. However, her confidence is shattered when the warrior politely declines, explaining that she makes it a point to avoid indulging in sweets or unnecessary luxuries. The rejection is so unexpected that it leaves the young girl reeling in shock. Panic begins to set in for the inventor, who had pinned her hopes on this dessert to win the knight's favor and perhaps mitigate any trouble they might face for their disruptive arrival at the lake. In a final, desperate attempt, she points toward the stoic swordsman, noting that even he, a man known for his distaste for sweets, is currently partaking in the dessert. The warrior looks on with a mix of reluctance and quiet enjoyment, caught in the middle of the girl's persuasive efforts. She watches as Blaze enjoys the cold treat, his initial skepticism melting away with every spoonful. He admits that despite his harsh critique of her food reviews, the sensation of something so cold in the summer heat is undeniably pleasant. Seeing his reaction, the stoic knight finds her curiosity piqued by the contents of the pot. Nearby, the young girl can't help but laugh, delighted that her plan to win them over with the frozen dessert is finally working. The knight admits that her interest is thoroughly captured, especially after hearing such high praise. She takes a tentative spoonful, her expression shifting from professional detachment to genuine intrigue as she prepares for the first taste. As the sweetness hits her tongue, her eyes widen in a moment of pure, unadulterated shock. She finally understands why such a thing is called a devilish temptation, the intense flavor overwhelming her senses in a way she never expected. She confesses that the experience has completely overturned her understanding of food, bringing back memories of flavors she hasn't encountered since early childhood. The young disciples watch in awe, seeing their formidable mentor so deeply moved by a simple dessert. Watching the knight's transformation, the girl wears a smug, knowing grin, while Blaze notes how easily even the most disciplined warrior can fall to the charm of ice cream. Lost in the experience, the knight politely asks if she might have just a little bit more. However, a little more quickly turns into the knight, claiming the entire container for herself. The others can only watch in stunned silence as she abandons her usual restraint, urging her to take it easy before she overindulges. The consequences of her greed manifest almost instantly as a loud, ominous rumble echoes from her midsection. She clutches her stomach in sudden agony, her face pale as she realizes she has made a grave tactical error, much to the horror of those around her. Realizing the situation has turned dire, the young girl signals to her companions that it is time to deploy their secret weapon. She calls them over with a sense of urgency, knowing that the knight's dignity and comfort depends on what happens next. With a triumphant flourish, she reveals her latest invention, the Anywhere Emergency Toilet. It is a modest wooden structure housing a modern porcelain throne, a bizarre but necessary salvation for the knight's current predicament. She explains the intricate workings of her invention, detailing how a miniature steam engine powers a pump to create a functional, flushable toilet even in the middle of the wilderness. Seeing the knight's hesitation, she gently nudges her toward the door, assuring her that the convenience and relief it provides will be immediately apparent upon use. As the sounds of the forest return to the foreground, she informs the rest of the waiting group that since there's only one unit available, they will have to be patient and take their turns. The knight eventually emerges, looking remarkably rejuvenated and surrounded by an almost ethereal glow, and she declares with newfound conviction that these devices must be deployed immediately. She continues, expressing a desire to install these facilities throughout the capital, though the young inventor points out the logistical nightmare of retrofitting ancient buildings, suggesting it might only be feasible for new constructions. Undeterred by such practicalities, the noblewoman simply decides they will rebuild the necessary structures upon their return, leaving the girl reeling at the sheer scale of such an aristocratic solution. The sound of quiet laughter draws her attention to the sword saint, and she demands to know what he finds so amusing about the situation. While the young disciple looks on awkwardly, she laments that her own sense of normalcy seems so at odds with theirs, having hoped they would finally understand her perspective. Shaking off the moment, she realizes that with the knight's full support secured, they can now proceed at maximum speed with their specialized vehicles, though she reminds everyone not to neglect their task of gathering medicinal herbs. As they trek deeper into the woods, the group begins their search, though the young disciple quickly discovers that not everything in the forest is as beneficial as the herbs they seek. She and her companions spent the day immersed in the forest's wonders, from racing rugged buggies across the terrain to navigating the river's currents in a sturdy boat. Their efforts culminated in a successful harvest, filling their baskets with various herbs and even a few questionable mushrooms. As the sun began its descent, the young girl clutched a wooden crate, listening as the sword saint remarked on how quickly the day had vanished during their shared enjoyment. He turned his attention to the scarred knight, admitting he hadn't expected their competitive spirits to push their vehicles to such absolute limits during their impromptu race. Nearby, the young girl inquired if any empty magic bags remained, only to be told by her companion that every enchanted vessel was already brimming with the buggies, boats, and even the portable sanitation units they had brought along. The knight watched them, realizing that her initial concerns about persuasion had been entirely unnecessary. The problem became physically manifest as several massive sacks, overflowing with the day's herbal bounty, were dropped heavily onto the forest floor. Looking at the mountain of supplies, the young girl and the knight realized the passenger carriage, designed for only 4 people, could not possibly accommodate both the group and their massive haul. Despite the spatial constraints, they resolved to cram every last item into the vehicle, determined to bring their hard-earned harvest home regardless of the tight squeeze. After a journey spent amidst the cluttered interior, the carriage finally came to a halt, and its occupants began to disembark onto the familiar grounds of the research facility. The sword saint offered a word of praise to the administrator, who stood waiting to receive them, noting with a sense of relief that the excursion had concluded without any significant mishaps. Inside the carriage, the young disciple had finally succumbed to exhaustion, prompting the warrior to gently announce their arrival as the long day reached its end. He quietly pulls open the carriage door, only to find a scene of peaceful exhaustion within. Elizabeth sits stoically, serving as a living pillow for both Alma and Meru, who have drifted off into a deep sleep after their long day. Looking down at the resting pair, the knight decides to overlook their lack of decorum just this once, acknowledging that the expedition was indeed a resounding success. Even in her slumber, Meru murmurs happily about their achievements. He sat huddled in the dim candlelight, his voice trembling as he recounted the chilling rumors of screams that echoed from different circles and locations, never striking the same place twice. As he spoke, he gestured to the shadows, suggesting the cries could emerge from the outskirts forests or even the castle itself, leaving no one certain of where the next victim might be found. Suddenly, she leaned into the light with a wide, unsettling grin, whispering that the next scream might very well come from within their own research building. The sudden sound of a door handle turning sent him into a panicked frenzy, his scream piercing the quiet room as he recoiled in pure terror. He collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath and relieved to find it was only the knight entering, though the warriors seemed more annoyed by the commotion than concerned. The swordsman casually dismissed their fears, explaining that the mysterious screams heard throughout the capital were likely just the sounds of intense training from the new army recruits. He admitted that his own curiosity had led him to witness the training firsthand, noting that the methods employed by the princess in her role as a special advisor were indeed enough to make anyone cry out. They discussed the absence of their companion, acknowledging that her diverse responsibilities prevented her from focusing entirely on her duties as a guard, a situation they all understood and accepted. Despite his explanation, the young disciple remained puzzled by the shifting locations of the screams, until the knight clarified that moving the training grounds was a deliberate tactic to test the recruit's ability to adapt to different environments. The warrior then attempted to pivot to a new legend about a cursed elder, but his blunt delivery only served to irritate his companion, who felt he had sucked all the mystery and excitement out of their storytelling. He enters the room, his sharp gaze scanning the area as he asks the two young disciples if they're the only ones present. Gesturing toward the furniture, he indicates their master, who lies in a heap nearby. She is completely spent, draped over the sofa like a discarded doll, as the disciples explain her inability to snap back to reality after their recent travels. They had even tried to liven things up with scary stories, but to no avail, leading the swordsman to remark on how pathetic she looks. Despite her lethargy, she manages a weak stretch, insisting that the current lack of customers makes her absence acceptable, much to the warrior's irritation as he chides her for making her students worry. This relaxed atmosphere has allowed the students to excel, with notices posted detailing their new proficiencies. Lal has advanced to intermediate potions, while Alma has mastered the delicate art of alchemical drying. Watching them share a light-hearted moment, the warrior remarks on their trajectory toward a peaceful, slow-paced life, though he remains focused on the matter at hand. He then produces a large, woven basket, suggesting that while he lacks news, he has brought something else to stir their spirits. With a flourish, he reveals an assortment of exquisite, fruit-topped pastries that glisten under the light. The sight sends the young girl into a state of pure joy, her eyes sparkling as she wonders aloud if it is a special holiday like Valentine's or Mother's Day, though he quickly clarifies it is neither. Her companions, however, remain skeptical, whispering about rumors of dark guilds using imposters to run scams, unable to reconcile this sudden act of kindness with the man they know, leaving him visibly offended by their lack of trust. He stands before the group, clarifying that while the sweets are exceptional, they weren't crafted by Klaus. Meru, meanwhile, is lost in the delight of the treat, wondering about its unique, chewy texture. As he begins to reveal the truth, Alma's eyes widen in sheer disbelief, her mind jumping to the impossible conclusion that their stoic mentor might have baked them himself. He continues, explaining that the recipe was actually developed by the royal palace's head chef, who had remarkably chosen to become Klaus's apprentice to refine the technique. The dedication to the craft clearly earns his respect. The weight of this revelation hits the disciples like a physical blow. The idea of being trained by the highest-ranking chef in the country, a man who serves the marquis himself, is almost too much to comprehend. Meru pipes up, admiring the humility required for such a high-ranking figure to learn from others regardless of status. But he quickly snaps back, frustrated that she's missing his point entirely. His thoughts drift to Elizabeth, the knight whose rapid rise to power and unusual travel permission suggest she is operating under a direct royal mandate. Even as Meru continues to snack obliviously beside him, he mentally reviews her staggering history. A princess who became a tournament champion at 11, a military reformer at 15, and a general at 18, realizing that every piece of her legend is now converging. While Lyle and Alma celebrate their perceived success in befriending such a formidable woman, he remains deeply skeptical, his gaze fixed on the broader, more dangerous implications. He lets out a weary sigh, watching Meru's carefree demeanor and wondering how she can remain so unbothered by the storm brewing around them. A sense of dread settles over him as he contemplates the true nature of the powerful figure they are dealing with, someone possessed of both immense skill and the relentless drive to use it. He barely has time to process his growing unease before the door swings open, and Elizabeth makes a grand entrance. Meru jumps in surprise at the sudden intrusion, while Ted looks on with a mix of confusion and awe as the knight's presence fills the room. Addressing the young girl with formal precision, she announces that all the necessary preparations have finally been completed, her gaze sharp and determined. Meru is left reeling as the knight explains her new appointment as the general director of a massive operation. The project is staggering in scope, encompassing the development of waterworks, toilet production, paddle steamers, and even steam carriages. Because of the importance of this initiative, the royal palace has issued an official seal, granting Ted the authority to mobilize every workshop in the capital to bring these ambitious designs to life. Struggling to keep up, Meru stammers in disbelief, questioning where the ideas for such advanced machinery even originated. Elizabeth remains unfazed, clarifying that the operation isn't limited to just a few items, but a complete overhaul of the city's infrastructure. In response to her confusion, the knight points out that Meru herself drew up the detailed schematics during their recent trip, even suggesting the mass production of small boats. A wave of uncertainty washes over the young girl as she tries to recall making such grand plans, while her disciples watch the exchange with quiet curiosity. Ted steps forward to explain the practical hurdles, noting that while they have the royal backing, many areas of the construction still require a level of alchemy that only Meru can provide. He elaborates on the technical failures they've encountered, specifically the inability to create watertight seals without rubber gaskets. The current technology simply cannot replicate the complex shapes needed, making magic stones an absolute necessity for the systems to function. The true scale of the task is finally revealed when Elizabeth demands the production of components for 400 separate water systems. Meru can only stare in wide-eyed shock as the sheer magnitude of the request sinks in. She stands by as Elizabeth explains the situation to Lyle, apologizing for the sudden demands of the state. The knight mentions that despite her negotiations, the Prime Minister insisted the palace's needs take precedence, leaving the young noble to simply nod in stunned agreement. Beside her, the young alchemist is visibly distressed, realizing the sheer volume of work ahead. 400 components on top of her usual daily potions. Blaze announces he will begin coordinating with the necessary departments and departs, leaving the weight of the task hanging in the air. Determined to meet the challenge, she sets to work, using her toes to manipulate magic stones with startling dexterity. The spectacle intensifies as she employs both hands and feet, quadrupling her output while the men watch in stunned silence. Watching her work, Lyle's mind wanders to the incredible potency of her creations, wondering aloud if a single strand of her hair could be used to regenerate her entire being. She quickly shuts down the bizarre line of thought, sternly warning him against even considering such a dangerous experiment. He can't help but imagine the chaos that would ensue if multiple versions of her existed, picturing a group of them inevitably descending into a comical brawl. While he ponders this, Elizabeth casually mentions her plans for a leisurely cruise once the new paddle steamer is completed. This news surprises Blaze, who questions if the destination is indeed the southern continent, while a weary Meru laments her decision to design the ship for luxury in her sleep-deprived state. Her thoughts soon drift toward the exotic allure of the southern continent, specifically the promise of rare spices and the possibility of finding curry. Overcome with excitement, she leaps to her feet and declares the southern continent as their next destination, ignoring Elizabeth's worried caution about standing up so suddenly. She stands in the quiet library, her expression softening as the weight of their upcoming journey hangs in the air. Beside her, the young disciple looks away, while the stoic knight questions if their current pace will ever allow them to reach the southern continent. He suddenly bows his head, his voice thick with an apology that catches her off guard. The boy laments his own perceived inadequacy, wishing he possessed the skill to be a true master of his craft so he could lighten her immense burden. In response, she offers a gentle rebuttal, insisting that she would never dream of offloading her responsibilities onto an apprentice simply to pursue her own leisure. Despite her kindness, the young man remains troubled by his limitations. He gazes down at the small, glowing magic stone held within his palm, a physical reminder of his current ceiling. He reflects on the fact that he has only been training for 6 months. If only his creations possessed greater power, his mentor wouldn't be forced to resort to such extreme, multi-limbed alchemical methods. The group studies a complex chart detailing the variables of magical output, from the inherent quality of materials to the flow of ley lines. While the theory is clear, the practical application requires a level of physical conditioning and specialized knowledge, a library of experience that the young alchemist still lacks. The seasoned warrior places a hand on the boy's shoulder, offering a rare moment of encouragement by reminding him that steady progress is the only path to mastery. Though the apprentice understands the logic, the gap between his current self and his goals remains a source of deep frustration. She beams at him then, her smile radiating a genuine warmth that cuts through his self-doubt. With a cheerful tone, she promises that when the day finally comes that he is ready, she will be the first to rely on his strength. Turning her attention to the knight, she playfully chides him for his lack of tact, though he remains grounded in reality. He points out the logistical hurdles ahead, noting that even with their work finished, securing official permission for an overseas voyage is no simple feat. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, the two men step out onto the stone balcony, the grand architecture of the estate framing their quiet conversation. He admits that his wisdom is limited to the way of the blade, yet he warns the boy that reckless haste is rarely the solution to one's problems. With the hour growing late, the knight suggests they conclude their business for the day, leaving the young apprentice with much to ponder. He listens patiently as the young disciple explains his desire to contribute immediately, acknowledging that while some problems require time, he wants to do what is within his power. Because of this earnestness, the knight suggests that the boys seek guidance from Elizabeth upon her return, citing her vast experience in effective training methods. The suggestion causes the boy to recoil, questioning if training was merely a euphemism for torture, though the knight reassures him that such extreme measures aren't forced upon important guests. As a sudden sneeze echoes from nearby, the swordsman chuckles, advising the youth to leave the heavy lifting to the professionals and to avoid reckless behavior that might be difficult to manage. Continuing their walk through the corridor, he admits that even their own master wouldn't resort to the legendary intensity of the training they were discussing. Moments later, the young noble walks alone through the quiet halls, his head bowed in deep contemplation of the path ahead. He gazes down at the small stone in his palm, struck by the realization that his current strength is barely a fraction of what his companion possesses. His mind drifts back to the sight of her working, remembering how she synthesized complex potions with a speed and dexterity that seemed almost supernatural. The gap between them feels immense. He calculates that by the time he masters quadruple synthesis, she will likely have advanced even further beyond his reach. Gripping his staff with renewed resolve, he watches her from the window, knowing he must accelerate his growth if he hopes to keep pace with those leading the way. He narrowed his eyes, a newfound resolve hardening his gaze as he spoke with Blaze. He declared his intention to surpass even their master's expectations by attempting something unprecedented. Blaze, standing tall beside him, could only remark on the sheer audacity of the plan, noting that even their mentor would likely hesitate to take such a drastic step. Driven by this conviction, he bolted through the iron gates of the estate, his boots pounding against the cobblestones. He sprinted through the city streets, his breath coming in short bursts as he neared a towering, multi-storied structure. As the destination loomed ahead, he questioned if this was indeed the place where his grueling new path would begin. Elizabeth pushes her troops to their absolute limits, treating the training ground as a literal battlefield where stopping is not an option, even for those coughing up blood. Amidst the shouting and the dust, an aide approaches her with urgent news, stating that the Prime Minister requires her presence for an immediate discussion. She takes the offered document, her brow furrowing as she processes the startling news of envoys arriving from the southern continent, a development that clearly demands her full attention. While she deals with the weight of political affairs, Meru is focused on her own growth, straining as she heaves a practice sword through the air with a determined grunt, her small frame vibrating with the effort. Watching her progress from a distance, Blaze remarks that her swings are finally showing some promise, a rare bit of praise that brings a small, supportive smile to Alma's face. He watches as the young girl's eyes light up at the encouragement, and she eagerly draws her blade, suggesting they jump straight into a duel. But he quickly reins her in, warning that she's still far too inexperienced for such risks. Her gaze then drifts to the far end of the grounds, where she catches sight of Lyle engaged in a fierce, sparring match with Elizabeth, confirming her suspicions about where he had been spending his time. She watches as Blaze reflects on the passage of time, noting that a full month has already slipped by and admitting that the absence of their full group makes the training sessions feel strangely quiet and lonely. He then presents a letter to the group, which reveals that Lyle has dedicated himself to training under Elizabeth's strict guidance in a desperate bid to close the strength gap between him and his mentor. He listens as Alma expresses her deep anxiety for their friend, prompting him to playfully tease her about her initial opposition to Lyle joining them, though his own expression remains thoughtful and concerned. She listens as he admits that the total silence from Lyle's camp is unsettling, especially since the boys' constant movement makes it impossible for them to verify his safety or his progress. He stands among the trees, listening as Alma suggests that checking on Lyle would only cause the boy embarrassment. She teases him, noting that his concern borders on that of an overprotective parent. In response to this, the young girl chimes in, advising that a true father should trust his child and wait patiently. He bristles at the comparison, sharply questioning who exactly she is calling a father. A sudden realization strikes her, her eyes lighting up as she defines her ideal image of a patriarch. To her, a father is someone reliable and solid who provides whatever their child desires. She then attempts a bold negotiation, asking for his beloved Buggy in exchange for the privilege of calling him Papa. He is utterly baffled by the offer, seeing no personal gain in such a lopsided deal. The swordsman remains firm, clutching his chest as he declares that he will never part with Max. Meru is caught off guard, realizing for the first time that he has actually given the mechanical vehicle a name. She admits that she had initially lost interest in the buggy due to the difficulty of driving it, but now that it has become a trend, she feels compelled to start practicing again. Her companion interrupts this train of thought, revealing that she spoke with a master blacksmith and learned of a massive surge in orders for similar vehicles. Meru is stunned, wondering how something so unique could suddenly be trending. The young girl stares blankly, her mind racing as she tries to reconcile her belief that she was a trendsetter with the reality that the market is now flooded. Meanwhile, at the forge, the blacksmith points an accusing finger, identifying the source of his sudden, overwhelming workload. He explains that the knights who came to place orders cited a specific individual as their inspiration. The swordsman stands under the weight of this revelation, a dark aura of gloom surrounding him as the girls watch in silence. The unintended consequences of his actions have finally caught up with him. He is reported to have been driving with reckless abandon, taunting other riders and questioning if their beloved steeds were truly that slow before challenging them to aggressive races. He is the reason the workshop is currently in such a state of upheaval, as the blacksmith explains to the young alchemist and her companion that the knights have become utterly obsessed with the vehicles, as if a strange curse has taken hold of the entire guard. The blacksmith's complaints are met with a defense from the swordsman, who points out the undeniable tactical advantages. The buggies offer superior speed and endurance compared to horses, and their ability to be stored in a magic bag makes them the perfect tool for royal guards during sudden emergencies. His logic does little to appease the young alchemist, who watches him with a look of weary judgment. While he considers the situation perfect, she feels that the adults in her life should exercise a bit more self-restraint. She then highlights a critical bottleneck in the production process, explaining that these small vehicles require specialized parts, particularly the tires, which can only be produced through her unique alchemical synthesis. Her practical concerns prompt a stiff apology from the warrior, while the master of the forge suggests she learn from his companion's supposed kindness, even as he admits his own independent experiments haven't been going as planned. He watches as the conversation shifts to the new steam carriage, with the blacksmith explaining that since the larger projects have been handled, he has been able to dedicate his time to refining his personal craftsmanship. She hears him reveal that his major breakthrough came from a request to retrofit an existing vessel, leading to the surprising news that a paddle steamer is already prepared for a test run, months ahead of the original schedule. His news of a paddle steamer and a connection to the southern continent sparks a gleam of pure excitement in her eyes, especially when she learns of the bold, mysterious merchant who funded the entire project without hesitation. The girl is then invited to examine a collection of exotic items, as the blacksmith describes the benefactor as a ghost-like figure who appears and vanishes at will, yet would surely be eager to discuss business with someone of her talents. He had just finished discussing the new maritime project when the group arrived back at the research building. Meru greeted Barbara warmly, her mind already racing with plans to craft new components for the Buggies. As they entered, a well-dressed man with a prominent mustache stepped forward, tipping his hat in a polite greeting. He introduced himself simply as Bill, catching the group off guard with his sudden appearance. He explained that he was a representative of the Bordeaux Trading Company, a name that clearly carried weight given the surprised reaction from the young knight. The merchant expressed his delight at finally meeting the young alchemist, mentioning his dealings with the southern continent. With a knowing smile, he leaned in and whispered that there was something specific he wanted to show them, reaching into his bag for a hidden treasure. He then revealed a collection of exotic goods, causing the girls to gasp in wonder at the rare finds. The knight noted that a merchant's greatest assets were information and preparation, and this man seemed exceptionally well equipped. He gestured to the items, explaining that they were primarily importing spices and a few select fruits from the southern continent, items rarely seen in these parts. As he finished his explanation, she took a moment to inspect the spices, her eyes widening as she realized the curry blend was practically perfect. The aroma alone was enough to convince her of their superior quality. She then held up a large, dark pod with a look of pure joy, recognizing it immediately as cacao. The discovery seemed to be the highlight of the encounter for her. While she marveled at the cacao, her companion eagerly showed a handful of coffee beans to the knight, though he remained skeptical, unable to grasp the significance of the small, dark seeds. He squinted as he examined the items more closely, observing that neither the cacao nor the coffee were mainstream goods in their region. The merchant nodded in agreement, acknowledging the niche but valuable nature of his cargo. He stands with the group as the merchant explains the logistical difficulties of transporting exotic fruits, noting that without the preservation methods of coffee and chocolate, they are treated as mere perishables that spoil far too quickly. While the young disciple is charmed by the merchant's apparent kindness, the swordsman remains wary, sensing something untrustworthy about the man's demeanor. Undeterred by his suspicion, the young alchemist requests a portion of the goods to create a sample, which the merchant readily provides. With the raw materials in hand, she begins a rapid alchemical process, simultaneously roasting, grinding, and filtering the beans while heating water to the perfect temperature. The result is a steaming cup of dark liquid that fills the air with a rich, inviting aroma, exceeding even her own expectations for a first attempt. She takes an experimental sip, reflecting on the complex journey the bean takes from a simple cherry to a refined beverage. The intense bitterness of the black brew immediately overwhelms her, causing her face to twist in a grimace of pure shock. Seeing her struggle, the swordsman accepts the cup she offers, though the young disciple frantically warns them about the social implications of sharing the vessel. Still reeling from the sharp flavor, she can hardly believe anyone would enjoy such a drink, while her companion notes that the unadulterated brew is likely too potent for a child's palate. The swordsman takes a calm sip of the dark liquid, seemingly unaffected by the strength that had just floored his young companion. He acknowledges the sophisticated, addictive nature of the flavor, agreeing with the merchant that it possesses a distinct appeal for those with more mature tastes. Looking toward the future, they discuss how the addition of milk and sugar could make the drink accessible to everyone, while the merchant envisions a world where this caffeinated stimulant becomes a staple of every morning routine. She thanks the merchant for his interest in the coffee, promising to provide updates once the next batch of prototypes is ready. However, she quickly shifts the tone of the conversation, sensing that the pleasantries are merely a prelude to a far more significant matter he has yet to disclose. He acknowledges her sharp intuition with a nod, admitting that while the business discussion was genuine, it served as a cover for his primary objective. He confesses that he carried a hidden agenda, one that requires her specific expertise beyond simple trade. The merchant leans in closer, his expression turning serious as he asks if she is aware of the impending arrival of diplomatic envoys from the southern continent. The news clearly catches her off guard, as the scale of the situation is far larger than she anticipated. He explains that the kingdom's recent advancements have become a topic of international intrigue, with foreign powers taking notice of their remarkable development. He notes that the sudden surge in progress has made their nation a focal point for curiosity and potential alliance. As he continues, he details how the introduction of steam carriages and the widespread availability of high-quality potions have fueled rumors across the borders. Stories of a legendary saintess and a mystical magic sword have only added to the mystique, prompting other nations to send official representatives to investigate. The knight questions why a merchant would be tasked with such a high-level diplomatic affair, but the man clarifies that the trade guild specifically requested his involvement. Because he is well-versed in local culture and customs, he has been appointed to manage the delicate interactions with the foreign visitors. Despite the extensive preparations already in motion, he admits that a critical issue remains unresolved, casting a shadow over the impending arrival. The group listens intently as the gravity of the situation settles over the room. He points out that all the rumors and technological leaps currently fascinating the world are centered around a single person. Without that individual's direct input, no one in the official delegation can adequately explain the origins or the mechanics of these wonders to the envoys. The realization hits her as the merchant explains that Princess Elizabeth, the very person who had appointed her, was the one who secretly requested this favor. It becomes clear that her involvement is not just a suggestion, but a direct, albeit covert, order from the highest levels of the knightly order. He concludes his proposal with a startling request. He wants her to pose as his daughter during the upcoming diplomatic meetings. By acting as his subtle support, she can provide the necessary explanations to the envoys without drawing undue attention to her true identity or the source of her knowledge. He observes with a satisfied smile as the young girl's eyes light up at the mention of exotic imports, noting that she is already completely hooked on the idea. While she eagerly anticipates the flavors of the southern continent, the knight beside them remains focused, agreeing that the plan to hear more about their goods and cuisine is a sound strategy for their upcoming diplomatic efforts. He continues the discussion, pivoting to the logistical challenges of acquiring rubber trees, a resource not included in the initial manifests. The merchant explains that while they aren't dealing with it yet, he can arrange for someone to bring it if described properly, prompting the knight to realize they should begin prototyping curry and chocolate as soon as possible to capitalize on these new ingredients. She, meanwhile, is completely captivated by the array of spices, sampling them with an intensity that borders on obsession. As she declares each one to be super addictive, the men realize that serving gourmet dishes made from these southern ingredients will undoubtedly seal the deal for even more imports, ensuring a prosperous trade relationship. The official request is soon delivered to the visiting delegation at the southern port, specifically asking for any flora that yields a thick, white sap. The messenger presents the document with a formal air, emphasizing the importance of this particular botanical acquisition for the kingdom's ongoing development projects. He accepts the proposal with a measured curiosity, his sharp eyes scanning the document as he considers the implications of such a specific interest. With a calm confidence, he assures the officials that he has an idea and will have the requested items prepared, looking forward to their continued cooperation. They depart the meeting shortly after, the larger man expressing his skepticism about the request, recalling the painful rashes such trees caused him in his youth. The leader remains thoughtful, acknowledging the oddity of the request, but recognizing that there must be a significant purpose behind the kingdom's desire for the sap-producing trees. The group soon arrives at the bustling docks, where their attention is immediately seized by a massive vessel unlike any they have seen before. The ship is equipped with large mechanical paddle wheels, a stark contrast to the traditional sailing ships anchored nearby, signaling a major shift in maritime technology. They marvel at the engineering of the ship, particularly the enormous paddle wheels mounted to its sides, speculating on whether such a design could function on land as well as sea. The guard wonders if removing the wheels would make the vessel lighter, but the leader correctly identifies that the rotating wheels are essential for generating thrust. The conversation shifts to the mechanics of the return voyage, noting that the prevailing southern winds will provide a significant advantage for their departure. They discuss how the current wind conditions are ideal for testing the ship's capabilities, allowing them to utilize side sails in conjunction with the new mechanical systems. They conclude that the integration of these mechanical wheels allows for a far more efficient journey, eliminating the need for the tedious zigzagging required by traditional sailing vessels when moving against the wind. By folding the sails and relying on the wheels for straight-line movement, the ship can maintain a direct and rapid course back to their homeland. He stands with his guard, his mind already dissecting the mechanics of the vessel before them. While his companion marvels at the connection to the rumored horseless carriages, the envoy leader focuses on the logistical impossibility of traditional power sources, noting that neither human labor nor livestock would be efficient enough for such a feat. As they walk, the guard praises his master's seemingly boundless knowledge, but the young man remains humble, dismissing his insights as mere logical deduction based on common knowledge. Despite his calm exterior, his gaze sharpens with a deeper suspicion, realizing that the mechanical marvels are merely a symptom of a much larger mystery, the true catalyst behind Virgin Green's sudden and rapid advancement. Reaching into his own reserves of knowledge, the alchemist of the southern continent reveals a glowing tome, confident that the ancient wisdom of his predecessors will guide him to the truth behind these rumors. The two travelers from the south walk through the bustling streets of Virgin Green, taking in the sights of the developed city. The leader, Damien, reminds his companion that their primary objective is to investigate the connection between this nation's sudden advancement and the field of alchemy. He continues his instructions, advising the guard to maintain a confident air and to keep his own identity as an alchemist a secret. He notes that if they are prompted for a gift, it might serve as the perfect opportunity to gain more information about their hosts. Their conversation is abruptly cut short by the piercing screech of metal on stone as a large, mechanical vehicle grinds to a halt beside them. A jovial man in a wide-brimmed hat, Bill, steps down from the driver's seat, apologizing for the sudden stop and introducing his famous horseless carriage. Once they are settled inside the moving vehicle, the guard marvels at the smooth ride and the incredible speed, noting that it is far superior to traveling by horse. Damien watches the passing scenery, his mind already racing with questions about the machine's design. Seeing their reaction, Bill chuckles and asks if they aren't fond of horses. The guard admits with a sheepish grin that animals have never quite taken a liking to him, making this mechanical alternative much more appealing. Damien, however, is focused on the mechanics, wondering how a simple metal frame can transport 3 grown men and their heavy luggage with such efficiency. He confesses to himself that even seeing it with his own eyes, the underlying principles of this sorcery remain a complete mystery. Their host proudly explains that the carriage is powered by a perfect, clean system that utilizes alchemy to its fullest potential. He assures them that these steam engines are far safer than any beast of burden, though the guard still finds the absence of a horse slightly unnerving. As the explanation continues, a sharp glint of realization appears in the alchemist's eyes. He has spotted something, a detail in the construction or the way the energy flows, that demands closer inspection. He leans forward, his voice steady as he asks Bill for a more detailed explanation of the engine's inner workings. He emphasizes that a simple description won't be enough for the report he must eventually deliver to his superiors in the South. Sensing the growing intensity of the conversation, the guard interjects with a boisterous comment about the local food, eager to find a good meal after their long journey. Damien relents, suggesting they find a place to eat and rest first, leaving Bill to wipe a bead of nervous sweat from his brow. He admits to feeling a bit hungry, a sentiment that brings a wide, jovial smile to Bill's face as they continue their journey. Relieved to be nearing their destination, the merchant notes they are almost there to meet the others, while the carriage continues its bouncy journey through the streets of Burton Green. Meanwhile, at a quiet restaurant under Bill's management, the young knight gazes at the spread before him, concerned that the preparations have been far too extravagant for a simple welcome. Beside him, the young girl proudly presents a table overflowing with delicacies, reminding him that such a feast is necessary to properly welcome guests from the southern continent on behalf of their nation. Stepping outside for a moment, the two discuss the potential impact of these dishes on future demand, though the knight reminds her that their primary role was meant to be supporting the explanation of alchemical technology rather than culinary expansion. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of the carriage, as Bill calls out to them just as a bell rings inside, signaling to the girl that the final preparations are complete and the guests have arrived. Before she rushes off to serve, the knight gives her a stern warning to keep her identity as an alchemist a secret, to which she playfully agrees before assuming her role as the merchant's daughter, calling out to her papa as she heads back inside. As the guests step into the establishment, the lead envoy pauses, his senses piqued by an aroma that feels strangely familiar, though he cannot quite place where he has encountered it before. Taking their seats, the visitors begin to analyze the meal, noting the complex blend of spices that sets it apart from the typical local fare they expected to find in this region. Amidst the service, the envoy's sharp gaze fixes intently on the young girl, prompting a look of sudden confusion to cross her face as she senses his scrutiny. He stares in disbelief, the revelation that another alchemist stands before him, shaking his composure. He questions how such a thing is possible, given the scarcity of their kind on the southern continent. Beside him, the merchant and the knight watch the exchange with varying degrees of apprehension as the tension in the room thickens. The envoy's guard quickly interjects, attempting to shield his master's identity by claiming he couldn't possibly be an alchemist, but the knight sharply points out that no such accusation had been made yet. The knight tries to silence the young girl, frustrated that her secret is already out, while the envoy explains that those of their craft possess an innate ability to recognize one another instantly. He fixes an intense gaze upon her, wondering aloud if the grimoire she carries is a recent creation, leaving her momentarily bewildered by his scrutiny. He continues his explanation, noting that while formal identification is rare due to their dwindling numbers, the distinct flow of ley lines emanating from a grimoire is unmistakable to a trained peer. Upon closer inspection, his eyes widen in shock as he realizes the truth. The artifact she carries is not new at all, but a relic over a century old. Despite his lingering questions, he decides to use the situation to his advantage, noting that having a local alchemist, or pharmacist as she insists, is quite convenient for discussing the intricacies of the steam engines. He remains skeptical that a child could be responsible for such advanced engineering as the carriage or the magic sword, even as she steps forward to offer a full explanation. With a firm strike against the machinery, she prepares to delve into the technical details of the steam engine, ready to prove her expertise. She gestures toward the technical diagrams, explaining the intricate process of using magic stones to vaporize and then condense water within the system to generate power. As she finishes her explanation, The merchant expresses concern about sharing such valuable secrets so freely, though he admits it would be convenient if they could build it too. The knight, however, reminds them that their guest is a fellow alchemist, justifying the transparency. Shifting the topic to martial matters, the warrior brings up the subject of magic swords, prompting a startled reaction from the traveler, who finds himself struggling to process the dense information recorded within the ancient grimoire. To demonstrate his point, the knight draws his massive blade and plants it firmly on the table with a heavy thud, drawing gasps of awe from the onlookers. When the guard reaches out in curiosity, he is sharply rebuked for trying to handle such a dangerous weapon in public. Amused by the dramatic display, she chuckles at the intense reactions, noting that while no ordinary person would want to use such a thing, she almost wishes she could have demonstrated its true power herself. Despite the warning, the alchemist leans in closer, his eyes wide with genuine admiration as he admits he never expected to see a weapon of this caliber with his own eyes. He continues to marvel at the blade's sheer scale and craftsmanship, while the knight offers a silent, stoic nod of acknowledgement to his appreciation. This encounter reminds the traveler of a legendary treasure from his own land, known as the frozen flame sword of four-leaf, a weapon revered by all swordsmen despite his personal reservations about its slender design. The mention of that specific name causes the merchant to perk up in surprise, as he turns to the young girl and asks if she has any connection to the prestigious four-leaf family. Before she can respond, the alchemist reveals a startling truth. He too bears the name Four-Leaf, though he clarifies that they share no direct blood relation. He explains that the legendary frozen flame sword was designed for the extreme task of heating and then freezing a dragon's heart for preservation. However, the young girl casually dismisses the grand history, identifying the artifact as nothing more than a common cooking utensil, leaving him utterly speechless. This revelation leaves him reeling, his mind unable to grasp how a 1,000-year-old relic from his homeland could be treated so lightly. While he struggles with the shock, the others reflect on the poetic nature of such an ancient artifact drifting across continents only to be used in a kitchen. Overcome with a mix of shame and awe, he drops to his knees, his forehead touching the stone floor as he pleads for understanding. She simply watches him, explaining that she merely inherited the knowledge of the one who forged the blade in a past life, and tells him he is free to take the wood he came for. Sensing the tension needs to break, she gently pats his shoulder and presents a steaming plate of curry, insisting that he and his companion eat before the meal loses its warmth. The large guard beside him doesn't hesitate, digging into the fragrant dish with wide-eyed surprise at the rich flavors. Even as he remains hesitant, the aroma begins to chip away at his stoic exterior. His companion lets out a cry of pure delight, declaring that he has never tasted anything so incredible in all his travels. The local hosts smile, proud of the culinary skills their chef has displayed. As he finally takes a bite, a look of deep contemplation settles over his features. He realizes that the extraordinary quality of the meal isn't just skill, it is the subtle, masterful application of alchemy. She confirms his suspicion, noting that while alchemy is used to refine certain processes, they are working toward automating those steps in the workshop. His guard laughs, teasing him about the possibility of using his own alchemical talents for something as humble as cooking. She turns more serious then, cautioning that while alchemy is a powerful tool, it should never be the primary focus. History, she warns, shows that those who rely too heavily on such arts often meet a bitter end. Looking at him with a gaze that belies her years, she concludes that the true value lies not in the magic used to prepare it, but in the bounty that the land itself has nurtured and brought forth. He stands with his guard as the young alchemist explains that the merchant, Bill, will assist with coordination. She expresses a desire for further cooperation, listing various exotic goods they might trade. As the negotiations conclude, he makes a silent vow to report these extraordinary findings back to his homeland. Soon after, their vessel cuts through the waves, beginning the long journey across the sea. While leaning against the ship's railing, the guard reminisces about the incredible curry they shared, eagerly suggesting a return trip. He remains seated in the shadows, his expression heavy with uncharacteristic doubt. The sudden shift in his demeanor prompts a concerned inquiry from his companion, but he can only stare at the deck, questioning the very path his life has taken. He reflects on the vast gap between himself and the girl. Despite being twice her age, he feels his alchemical knowledge doesn't even reach a tenth of hers. He realizes that a true alchemist's worth is found in the depth of their grimoire, and his previous arrogance, believing he was the continent's best, now feels utterly laughable. When he offers a quiet apology for his usual haughty behavior, his guard is visibly shaken, pleading with him to return to his arrogant, confident self. The warrior's voice rises with conviction as he insists that his master's vast knowledge is exactly what makes him amazing. He declares with fierce pride that there is no greater honor than serving as the bodyguard to the finest alchemist in their nation. Stunned by this unwavering loyalty, he looks up at his friend and softly acknowledges the man's incredible spirit. He quickly masks his emotion with a familiar jab, calling the guard an idiot and noting that being smarter than him is hardly a high bar to clear. Despite the insult, a sense of camaraderie returns as they walk together across the deck. He steps onto the familiar soil of his homeland, the long voyage across the sea finally at an end. Standing before the grand, domed architecture of the capital, he formally concludes his report on the mission to the northern lands. His superior, seated behind a heavy desk in the sun-drenched office, questions the claim that a mere child could possess power rivaling the alchemists of legend, but he confirms this is exactly what he witnessed. The official hesitates, noting the gravity of shifting national policy based on a single individual. Yet he counters that no nation could withstand Burgungreen if they have such a pharmacist in their ranks, urging for immediate action. He reflects on his own deception, admitting he tried to steal information under a false identity. Yet the northern people remained committed to a fair exchange, seeing right through his ruse with overwhelming grace. Looking back at the memories of his journey, he understands that the true value lies not just in the girl, but in the spirit and prosperity that the land has nurtured and brought forth. With a resolute gaze, he declares he will take full responsibility for the judgment of whether she is truly worthy of their highest regard and a formal alliance. Meanwhile, back in the northern city, the knight commends the young alchemist for handling the unexpected issues of the recent negotiations, which have already begun to yield significant profits for the region. As she examines the newly signed friendship treaty, the knight realizes the southern continent's sudden interest was driven specifically by the young girl's growing reputation. They gather to discuss the surprising turn of events, noting that an influential figure in the southern government must have pushed for the alliance, leaving the young alchemist bewildered by her own international influence. She stands with her arms crossed, her expression serious as she explains that the news of the recent diplomatic success has already begun to ripple across the borders of other nations. Beside her, the young alchemist can't help but wonder if the sudden international interest is simply because everyone enjoyed the curry she prepared, jokingly dubbing it a curry treaty. The knight punctuates her point by slamming a thick stack of official documents onto the table, the force of the impact sending papers fluttering. She reveals that every neighboring country is now clamoring for an audience with the girl, and even the Holy Nation has formally requested to recognize her as a saint, a revelation that leaves the young warrior and the disciple gaping in disbelief. Turning her back to the group, she gazes out toward the horizon while explaining that the Prime Minister intends to shield the girl from these political pressures by rejecting all requests until she reaches the age of 15. However, she emphasizes that she values the girl's own perspective on the matter and wishes to hear her thoughts before any final decisions are made. She listens as the young girl flatly refuses the diplomatic spotlight, crossing her arms with a stubborn pout while declaring that she is far too busy automating the production of chocolate to deal with international politics. The swordsman looks on with a mix of confusion and exasperation, questioning if confectionery is truly her primary responsibility, but the knight simply nods in quiet acceptance of the girl's priorities. As the conversation winds down, the knight watches the girl with a newfound sense of respect, realizing that her unique brilliance and unconventional approach to problems extend far beyond the realm of simple alchemy. Suddenly, she halts in her tracks, a lingering question finally surfacing as she wonders aloud what this choco actually is, having never heard of such a thing. The young alchemist, realizing she may have said too much about her otherworldly knowledge, quickly tries to brush the question aside, leaving the knight to ponder the mysterious girl's true potential as they walk away from the manor. A rumor has been circulating in the royal capital about a mysterious figure who can defeat white mad bears with nothing but their bare hands. He is the one responsible for these feats, standing calmly as the massive beast he just bested crumples into the snow with a heavy thud. He acknowledges that he is indeed the subject of those stories, his expression firm and full of newfound resolve as he reflects on his progress. He writes a letter from the northern border, explaining that he is currently assisting Elizabeth with subjugating monsters alongside the border guard while wondering how everyone back home is faring. He realizes that while the rigors of recruit training have changed him, he isn't ready to return to his master just yet, feeling the need to push his limits even further in this harsh environment. The group back at the manor gathers to read the message that has finally arrived, containing his apologies for the long absence and a promise to return only when he has become truly useful. They exchange looks of disbelief, particularly regarding the rumors of his bare-handed bear hunting, something neither of them had heard about until this moment. She dismisses the bear slaying as the most trivial part of the update, noting that despite his growth, he still has a long way to go before he can truly consider himself a master. She, meanwhile, finds herself questioning the wisdom of their current mission in the high mountain region, where monsters far more dangerous than bears lurk, even as she acknowledges the trust placed in his strength. They conclude that he is truly on the same wavelength as them, observing that the essence of the four-leaf style is naturally manifesting in him, even without direct instruction. She dismisses the idea that an alchemist's true nature is found in isolation. Blaze observes her with a mix of respect and curiosity, noting that even after their grueling training sessions, she possesses an unyielding drive to push herself further. Standing beside Alma, she boldly proclaims that the secret to her success isn't complex theory, but pure, unadulterated guts. The declaration carries a weight of determination that leaves her companion momentarily stunned. He questions this unconventional philosophy, but she admits with a wink that she actually knows very little about formal alchemy. She credits her ability to clear a mountain of mundane requests from plumbing to repairs, entirely to her stubborn refusal to quit. She acknowledges that the past 2 months have been a whirlwind of activity, largely due to Elizabeth's influence bringing in a surge of new tasks. While others saw the results, she was the one tirelessly laboring in the shadows to keep everything running smoothly. As the frantic pace of work finally begins to settle, the crisp air of autumn settles over the estate. It is a time of transition, where the focus shifts from the heat of labor to the bountiful rewards of the harvest season. Reflecting on their absent friend, Blaze admits he had hoped to guide Lyle toward a more peaceful, relaxed lifestyle. However, seeing the young man's growth, he decides to honor that drive and patiently await his return from the border. She playfully nudges her way into the conversation, assuring Blaze that he needn't worry about the lack of relaxation. She declares herself his official slow life supervisor, a title that leaves the seasoned warrior more than a little perplexed. Turning her attention to her assistant, she offers warm praise for Alma's tireless support during the recent rush. The unexpected compliment catches the young disciple off guard, sending a deep flush of embarrassment across her cheeks. She listens as Alma begins to tally the staggering list of her daily activities, from brewing advanced potions to relentless sword practice and visits to the forge. It is pointed out that for a self-proclaimed supervisor of slow living, she never seems to take a single moment for herself. She is overcome by a sudden bashfulness as she mentions a project she has been keeping under wraps. She admits it is a bit unrefined, which is why she has kept it hidden, but the time has come to reveal what she has been working on in secret. She admits to a peculiar habit. Whenever she feels drained, she drinks the failed intermediate potions from her practice sessions. To her surprise, they always make her feel better, leading her to wonder if that's the secret behind her boundless energy. A sudden jolt of realization hits her as she connects the dots. These failed experiments aren't just waste. They're essentially high-potency energy drinks. When the Sword Saint notices the vibrant color of one such potion, he asks if it's a high-quality advanced brew. She quickly dismisses his concern, explaining it's just a failed batch made with subpar ingredients that didn't turn out as intended. Despite her warning, he decides to test the liquid for himself, taking a large gulp. As the fluid goes down, his eyes widen in shock, while she and her disciple watch with bated breath, asking if he's all right. The transformation is immediate and explosive, as he feels as though he's been granted wings. He radiates a golden aura of pure power, leaving her completely awestruck by the sheer intensity of the failed potion's effect. Seeing how well he responded to the first dose, she cheerfully offers him another bottle. He remains speechless, still processing the overwhelming surge of energy coursing through his veins. The moment of high tension is interrupted by the sound of a door creaking open. Barbara enters the room, pushing a cart and offering tea to the group, unaware of the magical experiment that just took place. She stops dead in her tracks, her heart pounding as she witnesses the surreal sight of the two of them seemingly floating in a state of euphoric energy. After a moment of stunned silence, she manages to greet them, her composure momentarily shaken. Bursting with excitement, the young alchemist declares that she has stumbled upon a monumental discovery. She questions why no one in the history of alchemy has ever thought to utilize these potent failures in such a way before. The conversation turns to the potential of this discovery, with the group speculating that even the alchemist from the southern continent could have reached the Sword Saint's level of strength had he consumed these potions. He even considers traveling across the sea just to share this revelation with his former rival. She paces back and forth, a restless energy bubbling within her as she yearns for a new project to occupy her mind. Driven by this sudden spark of inspiration, she declares her intent to establish a chocolate factory before her disciple returns, enlisting a spirited companion to join her in this ambitious endeavor. Meanwhile, in the quiet corridors of the research building, the administrator pauses as the sound of hurried footsteps echoes past, a small smile playing on her lips as she reflects on the boundless energy of the young. Seeking technical expertise, the young alchemist consults with a master blacksmith, explaining the intricate process of tempering chocolate and her desire to find a way to automate the demanding task. The blacksmith listens intently, questioning the appeal of the confection, which prompts her to offer him a taste of her various attempts, ranging from dull failures to perfectly glossy successes. She samples one of the less successful batches herself, grimacing at the lackluster texture and appearance. Yet she continues to eat with a determined, if slightly messy, enthusiasm. As they sit around the workshop table, she elaborates on the challenges of precise temperature control, reinforcing her argument that a mechanical solution is necessary to achieve consistent quality. The conversation shifts when she mentions the concept of Valentines, a term that piques the interest of the warrior standing nearby, leading her to promise him a special, high-quality batch as a token of her appreciation for his leadership. However, the atmosphere turns tense when her female disciple explains that in certain cultures, this tradition involves expressing romantic feelings, a revelation that leaves the young alchemist visibly stunned and flustered. Seeing her distress, the disciple quickly clarifies that the gesture also extends to friends and family, prompting a relieved embrace from the alchemist, who finds the complexities of social customs at her age to be quite a handful. She quickly tries to clear up any misunderstandings with Ted, insisting that her interest in the boss isn't what he thinks. Ted, however, remains unconvinced by her flustered denial. Nearby, the young knight bluntly declares his lack of interest in sweets. Watching him from the corner of her eye, she wonders if she should still prepare a gift for him when the occasion finally arrives. Their companion, Alma, chimes in to remind them that he always complains about the excessive sweetness of her creations. He turns away with a huff, unable to deny the observation. This realization prompts her to consider alternatives, like whiskey bonbons, though she notes that the local selection is currently limited to just wine and ale. She knows she'll need something stronger, like rum or brandy, to get the flavor right. When she mentions her desire to produce liquor, the knight reacts with visible shock, prompting her to explain that her age prevents her from doing so legally. He then suggests a rather absurd solution, asking if her alchemy could simply turn her into an adult. She shuts the idea down immediately, leaving him to stew in his own frustration. Seeing the tension, the blacksmith steps in to defend the quality of their current stock, though the knight remains in a foul, menacing mood, questioning the man's resolve. As the men bicker, Alma turns to her with a curious question about whether alcohol is actually enjoyable. It occurs to her then that her friend is also a non-drinker. She describes her first experience with spirits as a bitter shock, a sentiment she heartily agrees with, noting that adults always seem to claim it's an acquired taste. Ultimately, she decides to put the matter of brewing aside for now, while the blacksmith encourages her, suggesting that anything she makes would likely be a masterpiece. She ponders the concept of alcohol as the trio navigates the bustling city streets, the ambient chatter of the crowd fading into the background of her thoughts. This reflection triggers a memory of a previous existence, where a weary woman in professional attire would find solace in a cold drink after a long day's labor. Realizing that establishing a brewery and perfecting the process takes significant time, she concludes that starting sooner rather than later might be a wise investment. Returning her focus to the present, she suggests to her companions that she might attempt a prototype once they return home. While the prospect of sweet alcoholic treats sends her female companion into a state of joyful anticipation, the stoic warrior beside them dismisses the very idea of such a concoction as nothing short of heresy. As the group continues their stroll, oblivious to their surroundings, they are being watched from the shadows of a nearby alleyway by two figures who question if she's indeed their target. Unaware of the predatory eyes fixed upon her, she maintains her cheerful demeanor while the men confirm her identity using a detailed sketch, noting her distinctive hair as they reiterate their orders to capture her alive. Meru and Alma walk through the quiet streets, unaware of the predatory eyes, tracking their every move from the shadows. The group of thugs watches them intently, discussing their plan to wait until the pair is isolated before launching a decisive ambush. One of the men lets out a sinister chuckle, suggesting they let the girls enjoy what will surely be their final meal. Meanwhile, within the safety of the manor, Barbara leads the count through the dimly lit corridors as the moon hangs high in the sky. She admits that she hasn't heard the full details herself, but notes that Klaus has been summoned, prompting them to wonder if it involved a new culinary request. They arrive at the room where the head chef is waiting, with the count expressing his anticipation for whatever surprises Meru's cooking might bring next. Upon entering, they are greeted by a startling sight. Alma is sprawled across a plush sofa, looking completely dazed and clutching a bottle. She cries out in alarm at the girl's disheveled state, while Meru stands nearby, looking increasingly uncomfortable under the scrutiny. The count quickly realizes that the bottle contains alcohol, and Meru sheepishly explains that she gave Alma too much because she seemed to be enjoying it so much. Despite the young girl's attempts to justify it as a simple taste test, Barbara sternly reminds her that minors are strictly forbidden from drinking, especially now that Alma is completely incapacitated. She extends an invitation to Barbara, suggesting she try some of the wine since they have lost their female taster. Barbara looks startled by the sudden offer, her eyes widening in surprise. Beside them, the sword saint indulges without a hint of remorse, claiming that for him, alcohol and water are practically the same. Barbara remains hesitant, noting that she is still on duty and should maintain her professionalism. However, she quickly rationalizes the situation, deciding that if the request comes directly from her young mistress, it essentially qualifies as a necessary part of her professional duties. Accepting the task, she moves to assist, pouring a glass while the other disciple remains slumped over on the nearby sofa, completely overcome by her earlier indulgence. The warrior observes the light-colored liquid, remarking that it is essentially juice intended for those with a low tolerance for spirits, suggesting it poses no real challenge. He then inquires about his own serving, prompting the young alchemist to point out the difference between a standard store-bought bottle and the refined red wine she has prepared specifically for the adults. She explains her motivation, noting that most wines available on the market are far too young, which led her to use alchemy to artificially replicate the lengthy maturation process that usually occurs within a barrel. Her method involves a precise sequence, removing skins and seeds, lightly crushing the fruit, and then using her unique skills to skip the traditional aging steps to produce both red and white varieties instantly. The Count and the Sword Saint take their first sips, immediately struck by the profound aroma and the exceptional quality of the vintage, finding it far superior to anything they expected. Even the administrator finds herself captivated by the flavor, drinking even as she continues her work, while the warrior watches her with a mix of amusement and disbelief at her sudden lack of restraint. She watches intently as the young alchemist reveals yet another prototype. The Count, swirling his glass, marvels at the smooth, complex taste that defies any known region or brewery, noting how the aroma evolves with every movement. Following the wine, the girl presents bottles of rum and brandy, explaining that these distilled liquors have been processed to achieve a much higher alcohol content. This announcement piques the interest of the group, with the administrator, the nobleman, and the knight all leaning forward in anticipation of what comes next. Instead of a simple drink, the liquor is transformed into a rich syrup and poured over a delicate pastry, creating a dessert that glistens under the light. The trio samples the creation, and the knight's initial dismissal of it as just sweets is instantly silenced by the refined aroma and the perfectly moist texture of the cake. The administrator is nearly overcome by the deliciousness, while the Count muses on the incredible evolution of culinary arts through alchemy. Watching them, the young alchemist feels a sense of pride, especially seeing the stoic warrior finally succumb to the allure of a well-crafted dessert. That pride quickly turns to exasperation as the knight decides the brandy is better enjoyed straight from the bottle, greedily asking for a dozen more, while the girl protests the sheer amount of work he is gulping down. As the commotion continues, the Count's keen eyes settle on a different vessel, prompting him to inquire about the mysterious liquid held within. She identifies it as whiskey, a spirit crafted from barley, though she confesses a lack of confidence in this particular batch due to the complexity of the process and the rarity of the necessary ingredients. She offers the new concoction to Klaus, encouraging him to try it. As Barbara takes a sip, the sheer potency of the spirit catches her off guard, leaving her coughing while admitting its delicious but intense strength. Despite the initial shock to the senses, the head chef finds himself impressed by the punchy kick of the beverage. He notes that achieving such a complex flavor with limited resources is a feat, even if the real thing would be on an entirely different level. This leads to a deeper explanation of the process, where the young alchemist details how true brewing involves a delicate dance of resident bacteria, barrel aromas, temperature shifts, and slow oxidation. She admits that while her pseudo-alchemy liquor is a start, it cannot yet replicate the natural chemical reactions of traditional methods. Sensing Blaze's intense gaze, she quickly clarifies that the current batch is merely a sample. Her goal is to find a professional brewer willing to collaborate, urging him not to consume the entire supply just yet. Seeing the potential in her work, Barbara mentions she has a contact who might be able to assist with the production. In a gesture of goodwill, the girl offers the remaining bottles to her companions, much to their delight. With the tasting concluded, Blaze decides to step outside for some fresh air, acknowledging his limit for the day. Before he departs, she sternly reminds him not to attempt driving the buggy after his indulgence. He steps out into the cool evening air, his silhouette framed by the grand architecture of the research building as he begins his walk. Unbeknownst to him, a group of shadowed figures watches from a high vantage point, their initial plan to strike faltering as they realize the formidable warrior is heading directly toward their position. Panic quickly sets in among these would-be kidnappers, and they scramble to retreat. They shout for one another to scatter in different directions, desperate to avoid a confrontation with the approaching knight. Breathless and terrified, they sprint through the narrow city alleys, their footsteps echoing as they flee into the darkness to escape the perceived threat. They are quickly subdued as Blaze pins the ringleader to the cobblestones. The man grunts in pain, his face contorted as the knight demands to know who sent them. The thug stammers, feigning ignorance about any orders. He tries to claim they acted alone this time, but Blaze isn't fooled, noting that while their presence was detectable, their escape maneuvers showed professional training. Blaze identifies this particular man as the leader of the group. The captive sneers, mentioning a big brother who won't take this defeat lightly. Blaze remains unimpressed, informing the man that they chose the wrong target to harass. With a final, ominous warning, the thug tells Blaze that they are far from the only ones hunting for their prize, and that he should live in constant fear. Blaze ponders the cryptic threat, wondering what exactly they are after. Deciding that the royal guards can handle the formal questioning, the knight prepares to depart. He secures the prisoner, intending to return to his companions without further delay. Before leaving, his eyes catch a glimpse of something tucked away. He reaches down and retrieves a crumpled piece of parchment from the unconscious man's person. As he smooths out the paper, his expression shifts from professional detachment to genuine surprise. The contents are clearly unexpected. It is a wanted poster, crudely drawn but unmistakable, featuring a cheerful depiction of Meru. The text declares an astronomical bounty on her head, a revelation that leaves the young girl reeling when she sees it. Back at the research building, the group stares at the document in disbelief. Barbara jokingly asks how many meals one would have to steal to earn such a price, while Meru can only stammer in confusion. Examining the paper more closely, he points out that it lacks the official seals of a government warrant. Meru frantically tries to remember if one of her alchemical experiments might have accidentally leveled a building, but the mystery of the bounty remains. She listens intently as Blaze reveals the source of the bounty, the notorious Dark Guild. Barbara stands beside her, equally concerned by the gravity of the situation. Inside the safety of the research building, she initially mistakes the group for mere petty scammers she's heard of before. However, Blaze quickly disabuses her of that notion, explaining that they are far more sinister than simple con artists. He describes them as a ruthless organization of mercenaries and criminals who will do anything for the right price. Their ranks include specialists in assassination and kidnapping, making them a formidable threat to anyone they target. Despite the danger, she finds humor in the situation, laughing at the idea of being taken alive for a bounty. She boasts about her training on the ley lines, claiming she can even melt through handcuffs, much to the knight's disbelief. As they continue their discussion, she muses that if someone wanted to kidnap her, they should have used delicious food as bait. Blaze, however, points out that her captors likely didn't expect a young girl to possess the strength to crush a massive tree with her bare hands. He sternly warns her not to be lured away by strangers offering sweets, a piece of advice she dismisses with a confident claim that she wouldn't go. Barbara, watching the exchange, can't help but think that the girl might actually be tempted. The administrator then offers a playful wink, reminding everyone that they have a powerful protector in the Sword Saint. She suggests that his presence alone should be enough to deter most threats. Seeing the two of them acting so carefree and making silly faces, he can only sigh in exasperation. Their lack of concern for the looming threat of the Dark Guild is clearly starting to wear on his nerves. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, the remaining thugs flee in a panic. They wail for their leader, desperately seeking the protection of someone they call Big Bro after the capture of their comrade, Troy. They eventually reach their superior, a masked man with a cold, piercing gaze. He looks down at them with utter contempt, noting that Troy was always slow and stupid, and expresses his disappointment that they failed so miserably once again. He sits in the dim light of their hideout, listening as his subordinates offer pathetic excuses for their failure. They admit they were looking for a significant payout because their usual scams have been failing, but he warns them that acting independently only makes the entire group look incompetent. Rising from his seat, the leader looks over the battered man, demanding to know who was responsible for their state. The thugs can only weep, calling out to him in desperation as they recount their defeat. Settling back into his chair with a cold, predatory gaze, he promises to take the head of the man who crossed them, claiming it is a small price to pay for his loyal, if foolish, followers. He listens as the men quickly describe their assailant as a guard knight and the alchemist's personal escort, noting his silver hair and a uniform that distinguishes him from the standard royal capital guards. He identifies the warrior as Blaze Galfield, his eyes narrowing as he realizes the caliber of the opponent his men were foolish enough to engage. He remains calm as his subordinates react with shock that their leader knows such a high-profile figure, his silence more intimidating than any shout. He listens as they express their doubts, fearing that even their powerful leader might not be able to best Blaze in a direct confrontation. But he simply pulls his dark mask into place. He smirks behind the fabric, reminding them that victory does not always require a head-on assault. There are many ways to dismantle an enemy. He issues a new set of orders, commanding them to investigate the alchemist's social circle and kidnap any family members residing outside the capital to use as leverage. He watches as the subordinates, reinvigorated by the prospect of a more underhanded tactic, rush out to execute the mission, leaving him alone in the shadows. He sits in a dimly lit tavern, nursing a drink while reminding his unseen associates that he is the one taking the physical risk for their cause. He sounds weary but resolute, emphasizing that his own safety is secondary to the mission, though a hint of resentment lingers in his voice as he speaks of putting his body on the line. As the silence of the room settles around him, Blood remains hunched over the bar, his frustration simmering beneath his mask. His grip on the wooden edge tightens until the timber begins to splinter under the sheer force of his hand, the sound of cracking wood echoing in the quiet space. With a sudden, violent outburst, he smashes his fist through the counter, the wood exploding into shards. His eyes burn with a cold, focused hatred as he whispers the name of the man who clearly haunts his past, Blaze Galfield. It is evident that a deep and bitter history exists between the